Very good. I'll call the committee of the whole for today, December 8th, to order. Is there any declaration of interest regarding any item on the agenda? Not seeing any. If one should arise during the course of the meeting, feel free to declare it at that time. We have no business arising from the minutes, I believe. Nope. We have a delegation this morning. Very exciting. Katrina Paradun from Communications County here is going to present the new Grey County website. So good morning, Katrina, and welcome. Floor is yours.
Good morning. All right. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me up here at the podium instead of just in the back corner. I'm here to share some details on our new Grey County website, which was launched just a few weeks ago. Unfortunately, I know Brad Fritz, our business solutions manager, was on the agenda, but he couldn't be here today, nor could Rob Hatton, our communications manager. The two of them led this project over the last almost 2 years, so I do want to thank them for all of their hard work on this. So when we first began looking at a website refresh, there's our lovely new website. Here's what it looked like previously. In late 2020 and early 2021, our focus was on improving the user experience. And we started with a few key goals in mind. We wanted to improve the organization of content and services on the website. So this site contains a lot of content on hundreds of individual pages, and it's visited by a lot of people, and they're always looking for specific information. So it's really important that we make this simple to navigate and have all the information be easy to find. We also wanted to have a clean visual design without clutter that would be fitting of our Grey County brand and also improve ease of use. So for this project, we worked with a total budget of $40,000. Money is put aside yearly into a reserve in the information technology budget, and then ideally every 5 to 6 years, these pooled funds are used to complete a website refresh. This total included a custom theme design, the conversion of this design over to our content management system, which is Drupal, by a third-party development firm. They also helped us with some custom functionality, such as the events calendar, and with some image migration from the old site to the new site. It also included all of the external tools and testing that we used to develop the site architecture for navigation testing and to track user interaction. Let's go back to this one. So the first step towards creating the new site was looking at our site layout. So we created a very base structure for the new site with the 4 main headings. So you see resident services, business services, things to do, and government, called them buckets, if you will. And we created a simple sorting exercise in which we had testers pick items and put them in the bucket that they thought was most appropriate. So you can see on here, people looking for the business enterprise center. Everyone agreed that that belonged in business services. Some had a little bit more of a split, but we were able to get additional feedback and then sort all of our county items into the correct bucket. We shared this exercise extensively, not just with staff, but with the general public through direct email campaigns, networking, and through our social media. We wanted to know what the people who were using our services thought, not just the people working here. Once we had the basic layout for the site, we created a sample site and common scenario questions, and we had testers navigate through the sample site to select where they thought they should be able to find that information. So we can see on here that when we asked people to find licensed childcare, the vast majority of them went to resident services. We did have a couple of people select things to do in government. And then from resident services, almost everyone moved on to social services and then to licensed childcare. So we could feel quite confident that that was the correct place for that information. This also gives us more feedback on that test. We can see that most people were successful. Most people found a very direct route, and the score overall was quite high. With this data gathered, we were able to create a detailed site architecture. This also allows us to easily adjust and test different layout options. You see some noticeable changes on the new site. While our 4 main categories did remain very similar, some were renamed for clarity. Business services changed from just business. What was visitors on the old site is now called things to do, because it's not just visitors who want to learn about our beautiful forests and trails, our communities, or our stunning museum and archives facility. It's people that live here too. Social services, housing programs and services, and early learning and childcare have been grouped together under community services for ease of navigation And the how do I button in the corner has been changed to I want to, and condensed down to the most searched for options. A lot of people need to pay tickets and view bylaws. Once the structure was confirmed, we moved on to the design. We sourced a custom design theme from Chris Bauer, who was the same designer who did our visitgray.com a couple years back. And he created multiple layouts and templates based on functionality for the various sites. Grey County has a strong visual identity that strives to accurately represent the creative, innovative, and dynamic people who live and work in our communities. And using this same designer who built Visit Grey helped us ensure that we adhere to this brand identity and that our websites, all of them, are easily recognizable as belonging to Grey County. While the design was being built, this was an excellent opportunity for us to review pages and content. We had all of the individual departments review their pages, propose content changes and additions, and then communications provided a second review and edit for clarity, functionality, and ease of use. Throughout the design process, and while we were building the updated content in, we used a number of tools to track accessibility, compliance, and identify potential issues. One of them is built directly into our content management system, and it identifies concerns live on the site as you're editing. So you can see on here, as we're putting information into the website, if the site feels that there is an accessibility concern, then it will pop up with a little yellow box and we can click and see. For here, it's just asking what the alternative text is for this phone icon. We can go in there and say that's decorative. If you were having the website read out loud by a screen reader, it wouldn't need to say phone image. So we can mark that. We also have an external tool called Monsito, which grades our accessibility and it tracks the website's overall performance and search engine optimization. This will also catch any documents, including older PDFs that we do have a lot of, which at this point are not fully accessible. So once the content had been entered, we were ready for our final stage of user testing. We used some internal staff testers who gave excellent and extremely detailed feedback and suggestions. I'm looking at you, Sarah, who noticed a single point font size difference, but I mean, that's amazing. We also outsourced to an external company called UserBrain. I will try to open this video and just see. Yes, that's allowed. Thank you. I'm going to briefly turn down the volume on this. And so what UserBrain does is it provides testers from across Canada who were not familiar with our site or our content. They're assigned tasks and they're recorded navigating through and solving these tasks on the live site and talking out loud while they're doing so. So we can hear them as they go through their thought process, discuss any potential issues and challenges they found while completing the tasks. We took the feedback from all of these testers and made updates and changes where necessary. And of course, now that the site is live, it doesn't mean that the work is done. We're still encouraging feedback from staff, from the community, from the general public, and making final tweaks and adjustments as needed. The website feedback link is visible on every page, and it sends an email directly to communications and to IT so that we can deal with any potential issues as they arise. Our website is such an important tool. It's easy to think, well, it's just there to provide information, but it's often the first step for people looking for important programs and services, looking for a job, looking for help. It needs to be consistent and purposeful in how it communicates information, and it needs to work towards developing and maintaining meaningful connections with our communities and with our partners. So I do encourage all of you, if you haven't already, to take some time and explore that new site and let us know what you think. We welcome your feedback too. I know you have a very full agenda for the rest of the day, so I won't keep you any longer unless anyone has.
Sorry, the buttons are really sensitive up here. I think I cut you off at the end there, but you were looking for questions. Does anybody have any questions? It's a pretty nice looking website. Councillor Greg.
Thank you, Warden. Most of my questions today are front loaded to the early part of the agenda. So I've got a couple of quick ones I'll just ask of you here. What pages on the old site had the most clicks that you were responding to? And alongside that, kind of what had the most redirects? And what pages had the least amount of traffic, and how did you respond to that in terms of refreshing the site? And I guess I'll just leave one other thing with you. Quickly, anecdotally, when I have been using it so far, if I'm on Safari and I'm going to the council meeting page, Safari is not loading like Edge. So just a bit of feedback, just doesn't load the calendar. So,
Able, I mean, I will make note of that, but if you could take a screenshot of what it looks like for you. and send that over.
Katrina, could I get you, please?
There you go. Sorry about that. Yes, if you wouldn't mind sending me a screenshot, you can send it on the web feedback form or just to communications@gray.ca. Then I can pass that along to the IT end of this and let them know that there's some issues with Safari that they're trying to iron out. Thanks very much. As to your earlier question, I don't have the exact statistics on me right now, I'm afraid. But I do know that that was taken into account when they were building what were the top level services down into the menu. So by far the most popular pages on the site are the ones that were built into this I want to. So the majority of people coming to the site are looking for road conditions, to pay a ticket, to view bylaws, or to view job opportunities. Some pages we found that either had really out of date information or got very few hits were, I mean, some of them were removed and some were combined so that we could take multiple less used pages and bring them up to a higher level with more content on them. Does that answer your question?
and just one follow-up, most traffic visiting the site, does it come directly from Google or does it come from redirects? For instance, like Blue Mountain skiing, and then all of a sudden it's coming through their portal and into Grey County.
Well, we do get quite a bit of traffic, redirects from other pages. The majority of people that land on our site come to it either directly by typing in gray.ca or by searching in a web search engine such as Google, like looking for, you know, Grey County childcare, they type in and then they would land on our page.
Any other questions? Okay. Very good. Well, thank you very much, Katrina. Great presentation. Moving on, we have the consent agenda there. Is there any items that anyone would like removed for further discussion? Okay, not seeing any. Could I have a motion to receive the items as presented in the consent? Councillor DeBreen and Councillor Matrosovs. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And items for direction and discussion. The first is report regarding Grey Transit route review, and Stephanie Stewart is here this morning to speak to that report. Good morning, Stephanie, and welcome. The floor is yours. Oh, we need a mover and seconder. My apologies. Councillor Body and Councillor Dickert. Thank you. Just before you begin, Stephanie, it was brought to my attention and I forgot. There is 3 options, Councillor Body. Which was your motion referring to?
There we go. I would support option 2, I believe, is that we can discuss it further. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Body. Okay, Stephanie, my apologies. Carry on.
One moment, sorry about that. It's been a while since I've been in front of a crowd of people. Good morning, County Council. It's a pleasure to meet some of you for the first time, and it's a pleasure to see some familiar faces once again. I'm here today to discuss the financial decisions of the future of the Grey Transit route. I recognize that I'm presenting you with a very tough decision on your first meeting, and I sincerely apologize for that. But due to some personal reasons, time just cannot wait. But before we get to that tough decision, I thought I would explain to you what the GTR is and the impact it has had on our community. And if at any point you cannot hear me, please let me know and I will speak louder or clearer. The GTR is so much more than vehicles. While the vehicles help residents move to and throughout Gray and Bruce and Dufferin County at an affordable and reliable rate, the GTR is freedom, an equalizer, provides access to services, employment, resources and opportunities, and allows residents to have fun in our own backyard. The general oversight and administration of the Gray Transit route would not be possible without the following Gray County staff. We have our CAO, Kim Wingrove, myself, the Community Transportation Manager. We have our communications team, the economic development team, our legal team, the clerks, the finance, GIS team, IT, transportation staff, planning, and our emergency systems coordinator / claims supervisor. The day-to-day operations of the Gray Transit route would not be possible without the following staff from our Gray Transit route staff. The general manager, we have one. We have one operations manager, one office administrator, one receptionist, one call center employee, 7 full-time GTR chauffeurs, and 15 part-time chauffeurs. Here are just some pictures of the staff hard at work, along with the top photo there on the left is our general manager and our operations manager, who are my key contacts and help make our vision a reality. In addition to operating safely throughout the pandemic, the GTR staff have the immense weight and challenge of operating safely during our winters. While most of us are at home on these bad weather days, the GTR staff are up very early, shoveling snow, clearing vehicles, checking tire pressures, topping up washer fluid, and making sure winter safety kits are on board. And when the weather just doesn't quit and the staff have had to cancel the service, the work doesn't stop there. The GTR cares. Gray Transit route staff go through the passenger list. They text them, they call them, they email them, and they let anyone who has pre-booked know that their ride is not going to happen that day. Staff want to do everything possible to make sure no one is stranded. During this last storm, there's 2 examples I'd like to share with you. One of the chauffeurs recognized that one of the usual riders was going to be stranded at work if they didn't get in contact with them and didn't let them know that the bus was canceled. So GTR staff did everything they could to reach out to them and let them know. And the individual was able to leave work early and catch the last bus home before the route was canceled for the day. Another example is there was a young lady with a disability, and she takes the bus regularly. And because the route was canceled, we weren't able to get her home. So what happened was the parents called and contacted GTR staff, and we were able to make an arrangement for staff to stay with her to ensure that she wasn't left stranded alone in the dark in a snowstorm anywhere. And the parents were ever so grateful that we were able to do that for her. The GTR staff are always going above and beyond, and we are so lucky to be partnered with them. A colleague of mine recently described myself and the GTR staff as the 2-on-1 of transit. We are more than just a website. We are navigators, just a phone call away. We regularly help new riders navigate their transportation options available to them within our region and beyond. We help riders find employment opportunities along our bus route, find ways to get to their appointments, and find bus stops close to their school. Adding the GTR to Google Transit has been very beneficial, as Google helps to simplify what transit options are available for riders. Most recently, I've helped individuals get from Hanover to Markham, Toronto to Owen Sound, Hanover to Barrie, Walkerton to Wyerton, Hanover to Guelph, and Wasaga Beach to Owen Sound. The GTR link is so much greater than Gray County. It has allowed people to travel beyond. I'm going to review some of our ridership statistics, as this really shows the true impact of what the dollars have allowed to be possible. On this slide here, you will see an overview of the total GTR ridership for 2021, which is highlighted in blue, and 2022, which is highlighted in orange. In 2021, the GTR operated less days a week, and beginning in April of 2022, the GTR began operating more days a week. This enhanced level of service was only possible due to the financial investment made by Grey County Council last year. As you can see, your financial investment has had a significant impact on ridership. So just to note, you can all see it, but just to make it be very clear, this past month in November, we had 1,982 people ride the bus across all of our routes, while in November of last year, we had 678, which is quite substantial. So I'm going to break down each route just so you can see, because each route crosses through different municipalities and is used by different residents within Grey. So on this slide, you'll see a breakdown of the ridership for Route 1, which travels between Owen Sound and Dundalk, connecting passengers to Route 2 and allowing them to travel beyond Orangeville. In 2021, this service operated Monday to Friday, so 5 days a week. And in April of 2022, we started operating it 7 days a week. And as you can see, it has steadily increased. Route 2, which is our most popular route, runs between Dundalk and Orangeville, connecting passengers to the Orangeville Transit and GO Transit, providing passengers with access to the GTA. In April of 2021, this route operated Monday to Friday. This one's a little bit different than the other routes, simply because it started operating 7 days a week earlier than any of the other routes do. It started operating 7 days a week in July of 2021. How this was possible was funding for the Monday to Friday service is paid for by Grey County and Southgate's grant. And then the Saturday and Sunday service is paid for by the town of Shelburne. Route 3, which operates between Owen Sound to Meaford, allows passengers to connect to the town of Blue Mountains and then beyond. This service operated 5 days a week in April of 2021, but it operated Wednesday to Sunday. We were trying to cover the weekends off because of the tourism that exists along Highway 26. And then in 2022, we switched it to 7 days a week as well, because we had received significant feedback that the tourism industry doesn't stop on Mondays and Tuesdays. It keeps going. So people needed to work and utilize the service. So it now also operates 7 days a week. Route 4, which runs between Meaford to the town of Blue Mountains. It connects passengers to Collingwood Transit. So we connect directly at the village with like a seamless connection to Collingwood Transit. And with that, they can connect further to the Simcoe County Links system and then get to Barrie or Wasaga Beach or to the GO system in Barrie and really go anywhere. Again, in 2021 of April, it operated 5 days a week, Wednesday to Sunday, and then it switched to 7 days a week in 2022. We're continually having conversations with the town of Blue Mountains staff and the Blue Mountains Resort and Village Association to find out ways that we can increase the ridership on this route. It is one of our lowest ridership per route, and we haven't cracked why that is happening yet, but we are constantly working on it, and I have some ideas and partnerships in the works for 2023. Route 5, this one's a little bit complicated because there's some changes that happen throughout the year. I'll try to explain it as simply as possible. But it travels between Owen Sound and Wyerton. And then from May long weekend to September long weekend, it also goes up to Sauble Beach. So from May till September, you can see that it does increase, the ridership goes up. And that's because of the connection to Sauble Beach, and also an additional investment by the town of South Bruce Peninsula and Bruce County to extend the days of the service and add additional trips in the day so that more people can get there for employment purposes and just simply to have fun and avoid the traffic and the congestion that occurs at Sauble Beach. So originally the route only operated 3 days a week, and we operated Tuesday to Thursday. And then when County Council last year made the decision to invest further, we switched it to 5 days a week. And last summer, with the investment by Bruce County and South Bruce Peninsula, we are able to operate 7 days a week to Sauble Beach, which is where you see in June, July, and August, a huge increase in ridership. And really, that's just kudos to the investment in the foresight to see that this is definitely something that's needed there. Lastly, we have Route 6, which operates between Flesherton and Walkerton. This route helps individuals connect to Owen Sound through routes 1 and 2 that run along Highway 10, and also to Orangeville or to Guelph. So we connect into the Ghost bus system that runs between Owen Sound and Guelph, connects in Durham, so people can get off our bus and connect there and then travel on to Guelph as well. Originally in 2021, we only operated 2 days a week, Mondays and Fridays. In April of 2022, we switched to operating 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. It's clear that the service is more successful when residents have access to more consistency. So I have been told when they know that they can leave their vehicle at home, they can accept a job. Now they can leave that vehicle for someone else to use, or gas is really expensive and that's just a better option for them. So it's a very nice short route, and people quite enjoy the service now that it's 5 days a week. This route, however, is paid for solely by Grey County, and that Grey County contribution covers from Flesherton to Hanover, and then Bruce County pays for the bus to go from Hanover to Walkerton. There are no grant dollars associated to this service. Just a few more statistics for you. As you can see, again, the increase happens year over year, but the first column is how many people visited our grey.ca /GTR site. The second section is the booking site, which is on our page. You click to move on to book your ride. Most people have that saved on their browser now. They don't go through all the steps. So that's why that number isn't as high as you would expect it to be. But as you can see, it still has increased from year to year. Our phone call volume has increased significantly, and the amount of tickets we've sold has also increased. So that's a lot of partnerships I have with the YMCA, our Grey County Housing, the United Way, our high schools. More and more people are finding out about the service and are finding it very helpful to have some tickets on hand to give to their clients or their residents. So who are the faces behind the numbers? So first off, we have Jane. Jane is a senior who's finding it challenging to pay her car loan monthly. And because of the GTR, she was able to give up her car loan and rely solely on the Grey Transit route, reducing her monthly payments and allowing her to have more income or household income into her pocket. Next, we have Isabella. Isabella is in grade 12 and can now get her high school volunteer hours because of the GTR. Completing her volunteer hours means she can graduate on time. In the top right corner there, we have Joanna and Angela. They recently moved to Grey County because their parents were looking for a more affordable place to live. However, they were in grade 12 and they didn't want to miss their last year. So they were able to take the GTR to school every day and complete grade 12 with all their friends. In the bottom corner there, we have Samantha, Vienna, and Becky. And those three ladies were able to get a summer job at Sauble Beach as a result of the GTR. In the middle there, we have a gentleman whose name is Michael, and he uses the GTR to travel to the GTA for meetings and visit family and friends, reducing social isolation and enhancing his ability to work remotely. And lastly, we have our friends Ernest, Nell, and Ben. And often they use the GTR to enjoy a nice meal out while being responsible and avoiding traffic and having to deal with parking. The GTR is truly making a difference. The Grey Transit route has the potential to serve all residents, but the individuals who are currently getting the most out of the service are individuals with low resources and our most vulnerable populations. While we can quantify the individuals who ride the bus and understand why they ride the bus, what we don't often discuss is the trickle-down effect of the GTR. The GTR helps the rider, but it also helps their family. It helps our businesses as riders can go shopping and spend their money. And businesses can now draw from a larger pool of employees because of this service. The GTR is putting money back into our people's pockets. So we need you. Our ridership has increased for two main reasons. One, a direct result of the financial investment made by County Council last year, allowing our service to operate more days a week. And two, simply people finding out more about the service and being more comfortable traveling as a result, as COVID has calmed. I mean, and now we're into a new wave of something new, but has calmed. As time goes on, the demand is only going to increase. Cost of living has increased exponentially over the past few years as a result of COVID-19, rising cost of fuel, groceries, and shelter. Since the pandemic, many agencies that relied on volunteer drivers have struggled to get those drivers back. And this is a result of cost of gas increasing, which doesn't make the perk of being a volunteer driver very enticing anymore. The fear of getting sick while you're driving people around. People retiring later in life. The cost of living is going higher. The demographic of our demographic aging out of the volunteer system. The younger generations just don't seem as interested in volunteering. And the next group who should be volunteering and replacing the aging volunteers are just so busy dealing with day-to-day life and just trying to survive. So now, the tough decision. You have three options in front of you today. Option one, status quo. Option one will leave the level of service as it is, and the GTR will continue to operate at the current level of service, which began on April 1st, 2022. This level of service goes above and beyond the scope of the provincial funding, and as a result, has a net levy impact to taxation. Option two is the elimination of Route 6. Route 6 was not part of the original plan for service approved by the province and has no grant funding. This route provides service from Flesherton to Hanover and then Hanover to Walkerton. Ridership was slow to get started. However, in recent months, there has been more than 100 riders per month on this route. As the most expensive and least used route, if council is seeking to contain cost, staff would recommend eliminating this route. And option three, return to the base level of service. Council has the option to discontinue the enhanced level of service and operate at the level the county is contractually obligated to do by the grant. This is essentially a choice to wind the service down after March 31st, 2025, when the provincial funding is exhausted. I am now able to take your questions.
Thank you, Stephanie. That's a very comprehensive report. Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you, Warden Milne. Question for staff is, you had mentioned that the Route 6 that's on the motion right now, the Hanover to Walkerton section is covered by Bruce County. Does the motion prevent Bruce County from continuing the service from Hanover to Walkerton?
Through you, Warden. Yes, if we cancel the service, it essentially would stop them from having the service between Hanover and Walkerton because the bus just won't be going down the road.
Any others? Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And to follow up with that. So obviously that route services from people from Flesherton through Durham, from Durham to Hanover, Hanover to Walkerton. And you're saying it's growing. And certainly tell me if somebody was in Hanover and wanted to get to the GTA, would they go to Flesherton and then catch the light route going down? That's how people from Hanover get to Toronto. Is that part of the reason why people use that route, or do you maybe you wouldn't know?
Oh, your microphone.
Through you, Warden, to Councillor McQueen. Yes, that is the reason that some people are connecting. They use the Flesherton connection to go north or south. They also use the bus, say, to get from Hanover to Durham and connect to go to Guelph. So that's also a connection there as well. And the reason that the service has started to see more people use it as well is we added in 2022 additional stops in Hanover and in Walkerton. So that has increased the ridership, but in regards to the connection to the GTA or to the city in general, that is part of the reason people are using it. Part of the reason that people are using the service is to go to the stores in Hanover. Hanover has a lot of access to a variety of stores, and people's dollars can simply go further. And they also use it for employment. So there's a range of reasons why people are using the service along Gray Road 4. It's not just for the GTA.
Thank you for that. And to continue, could that be expanded from Walkerton to say to Kincardine? My reason is, could we seek a grant from Bruce Power? And the reason being is that that could be a corridor and then that helps subsidize it, but it's flowing into Bruce County, which heads toward, and I know they do support certain things. I just wonder if that's been investigated or could it be investigated?
Through you, Warden. Yes, it can certainly go further into Bruce County. Recently, I've also been asked if it would be possible to go further into West Gray, up to Newstead, to the new business developments that are happening up there. So it is possible to really take this bus wherever you want it to go. The simple fact is it's the financing. Bruce County is working on a transportation master plan. They have a study, or sorry, I shouldn't say a master plan. They have a study going on right now, and they are looking into transportation solutions for their residents. I do agree it would be wise to partner with them and try to make those arrangements with Bruce Power for sponsorship. I have had those discussions in the past. They just simply haven't evolved and turned into reality yet. But it is possible, and the demand is there. The one thing you have to remember about Gray Road 4, you're covering a lot of geography, and that's quite a long way. And some people just don't want to be on the bus for that long. And it's quite far. So it's hard to meet everybody's needs, like to get people to work on time or to wherever they're trying to get to with the vastness of how far we're trying to travel.
So just to follow up, and I understand it's not being subsidized, so it's the first one on the chopping block, so to speak. But I wonder through you, Mr. Warden, if it's a possibility that maybe myself as the Mayor of Gray Highlands, the Mayor of West Gray, Mayor of Hanover, and maybe Mayor of Brockton could have a meeting and talk to Bruce Power to see if there's a possibility of or having an opportunity to see if there is external funding or grant funding we could maybe try to obtain, and maybe expanding that, or maybe expanding that, including the warden of Bruce County, to see if there is an opportunity to go further.
Through you, Warden, I believe anything is possible. I would obviously have the CAO give me a hand with helping arrange that meeting, just to make sure that it is appropriate and it aligns with everybody's desires.
Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you, Warden Milne. The motion as presented is suggesting continuing the route into March of 2023 in order to give notice to ridership. I know the budget itself hasn't been tabled until next month. Is there a pressure to make this decision today, or is there an opportunity to delay the motion and have some of the discussions that Councillor McQueen is mentioning to try to see if there's some external interest in maintaining the route? Just kind of wondering on the necessity of the timing.
Thanks for that question, Councillor Nielsen. And I think as staff, our recommendation would be that we make a decision today based on the information that we have in front of us, just given the necessity of finances, need to put a number together and get that in front of you at the beginning of January. Given though the notice period and the fact that we were building into the budget, even with this recommended option 2, a continuation of the service to the end of March, I think that would still give us some time and give Bruce County some time to consider their financial situations and to have a conversation about, the potential of doing something more. So I think we could use that 2 or 3 month timeframe to have a conversation and work through it. As Stephanie mentioned, our contractor driver's seat has been really excellent to work with. So I'm not as concerned as I might be in other situations about, needing to have everything just nailed down forever. I know if we're able to negotiate other things, we'll be able to have other conversations.
Counselor McQueen.
Well, okay, I understand you have to put something in place, but I'm thinking is there an opportunity to have that meeting and maybe us as a lower tier might be able to put some money toward it as well, and as a partnership as West Grey, Grey Highlands, Hanover and Brockton. I don't know, you say Bruce Power or Bruce County puts money into it, but not Brockton. You look at the map of Ontario, what is a major corridor that goes from east to west, even in Ontario, is Grey Road 4. Like you don't have that, it's, then the next one is what, 89 and Highway 9 that moves people across. It is a major, you look at the truck traffic, the commercial traffic that cuts across through there, it's huge. So it is a major corridor across a large vast of central Ontario. So I just think there would be at least to have an opportunity to have that conversation. It may not go anywhere, but I think it's something that we should entertain because it moves people. And if it's building, I think it's something that could create an opportunity to continue. But you don't know unless you try. I would offer that.
Through you, Warden. In all honesty, as staff, we would like to see the current level of service stay. So if option 1, status quo, is selected, we have lots of time to have those conversations and find additional means for funding.
Counselor McKay, I see your hand up?
Okay, get some help here. Through you, Warden, just a couple of questions being new to this. Is there any charge for ridership? And also, have you ever taken a survey to find out how many people use this transportation for work purposes?
Through you, Warden, to Councillor McKay. So to answer your first question, it costs $5 to go between Owen Sound and Orangeville, Owen Sound to Walkerton, and Owen Sound to the town of Blue Mountains. It's $5 for adults. It gets a little cheaper for seniors and students, and children are free. To go up to Wyerton, it's $3 or $2.50 is the cost of the service. The cost was set by our grant application. That's how we came up with that number, was based on what we applied to the province that said this would be our fare system. In regards to surveying our riders, what we do know is we started the system basically during COVID. There was a lot of people not using it for employment because some employers didn't really want people using public transit and carpooling, just try to reduce the spread. So at the time, at the beginning, it was being used by people who really needed transit and really needed to use the service as an essential service. Now we're starting to see that more people are using it for employment. At this exact moment in time, we don't have a way of tracking if they're using it for employment, like the exact number. In 2023, it is our plan to start putting that on the website when they book, to ask them what they're using it for a short period of time. That being said, in 2021, we did do a survey asking lots of questions. Where do you want the bus to go? Why are you using the bus? So in the life of this transit system, we have done that survey. We haven't done it recently, though.
I'm going to just jump in here for a second. I'm going to say that the motion as on the floor is the elimination of Route 6. If there's some desire to do something different than that, an amendment would be welcomed to the motion. But just saying. Now I have Councillor Greg. Go ahead.
Thank you, Warden Milne. Just some, I'm coming from this from I've followed public transit for several years, and I know several years ago I mentioned it to our deputy mayor at the time, Deputy Mayor Wright, to look at Marquette, Michigan, because I had phoned Marquette, Michigan about 6 or 7 years ago, and they had an interesting transit service that went into rural areas outside of Marquette. And it was funded through state and federal funding sources. Currently, I have a family member who lives in Barrie, gets on Simcoe County Transit, rides the Simcoe County bus to Wasaga Beach. It meets with Collingwood Transit at Wasaga and comes over to Collingwood. We pick her up as recently as last Friday night. So I'm always picking her brains as to how many people are riding those buses. And we have a fact in front of us. We do not have significant population centers in Grey County that will drive this transit service. The numbers, I do have a question, I guess, for you. Does anyone ride for free, not under the age of 5, for example, the usage of a voucher? Or read a different way, does every rider pay?
Through you, Warden, to Councillor Greg. Yes, everybody pays. The only people who wouldn't pay would be if you had an attendant, if you had a disability and you were having someone support you while riding the bus.
Thank you, and I presume that. And I presume the difference between the riders per month in the report that you just placed up there earlier, which was like 506 per month on Route 1, 800 on Route 2, and the discrepancy between the total rides and tickets sold for the month of June, which was 1,103. I presume that's transfers then? How's that work? Because there's quite a difference between those two.
Through you, Warden, to Councillor Greg. So tickets sold doesn't mean you have to use it that day. So our tickets don't expire. So for example, the YMCA might buy 200 tickets all in one shot, happens to be during the month of June. But they won't actually be used until December. So it is a bit skewed. You are correct. It's just, it doesn't get used until the person tries to use it.
I appreciate the opportunity to ask questions because I'm not sure if it'll come back around for a second time. We do have a significant issue here. I don't think it's noted anywhere what the cost per ride is. Anywhere we haven't seen that. We are lacking total revenues. I haven't seen that in the presentation at all yet in terms of what the revenues are that we're generating here. I wrote all these, the total rides down, preparing for this. Both directions, it would appear that we're doing 16,000 rides a year between all the routes. So for instance, Route 1, 7 days, 28 rides, 4 per day, and you're doubling that coming both directions. To speak to further time to studying Route 6, there's 20 routes or 40 per week, and we've got 100 current riders. So we're operating at approximately 0.5 bodies per trip. And I think it's a difficult discussion. It is day one, but you know, no sound, we recognize 8 firefighters is better than 6, 10's better than 8, 12's better than 10. We have to get this conversation, I think, steered back to what the county can afford. And we have to recognize that we don't have the population centers to be able to drive the success of this. That's the study in July of 21. We're up 335% in ridership, but I think I figured we'd have to go up about 1,000% in ridership to get us to about 1.5 persons for each trip. And I don't think that really hard discussion has yet been had, but I think it certainly does have to be had. We just can't afford these types of subsidies. Some of this is a greater benefit to Dufferin County and Orangeville than the majority of Grey County residents. So that's my comments at this time. Thanks, Warden.
Thank you, sir. I have Councillor Body and then Matrosov.
Good. Thank you, Warden Mellon. When I moved this, I put it in the table for discussion, and council can vote it up or vote it down, and then we can move on with a different motion if that's what the 18 of us, or the majority of 18 of us, want to do. I support this motion because well, you're going to have to follow the bouncing ball around my head here maybe for a minute. I hate to see the increases in costs coming to us at this level. Owen Sound's got experience with an airport where the provincial government threw us money to build it and money to operate it, and little by little the money decreased and left us holding the bag for an airport that we couldn't really afford for a very few users. So I've got that in the back of my mind that we no doubt will have pressures with this going forward with gasoline, with insurance, with various things. However, municipality isn't in the business of profiting. We're in the business of providing services, and these are services that I think are needed throughout Grey County. And unfortunately, we have to carry some of that cost because the province isn't carrying enough of it. What happens in the future if they quit funding it at all? That will be a decision in the future that we'll have to make, and it'll be a tough decision. Anytime you're providing a service and go to cut it back, it's unpopular, and it's very difficult to do. It's my understanding, and I could be wrong, that the TTC in Toronto is about the only transit system in Canada that breaks even. You know, all the others are municipally provided, and they are a service. I can't remember what our losses. Not supposed to use that word, what it costs the taxpayers of the city of Owen Sound to run our transit, but it's certainly needed for people to be able to get to doctor's appointments and get around. As we've looked at our housing costs jumping, especially in Blue Mountains over the last couple of years, and people that are working over there in the service industry that can't afford to live there, it's great that somebody, an employee or a resident of Grey County, can get a job over there and continue to live someplace that they can afford to live somewhere else in Grey County, and that we move them around. So I think that's important. Trying to find that middle ground on option 2, if we don't have a lot of uses, Scott's just hit on that route. It's pretty expensive to run something that isn't being used a lot, and to kick it down the road with the hope or the dream of being able to talk to Bruce Power or someone else to fund it when we don't have that in place now makes it a hard decision, and we can kick things down the road forever without ever getting there. Other things that I've got in my note, of course, well, I just did economic development, employment opportunities, and live where you live. Climate change, of course, the more people we can get using those buses, unless we have driving, the more it's going to help our climate over the long run. So I support giving us services where we're getting the best bang for our buck, and if we got different funding for that other route from the provincial government, then I'd be all ears. But for now, I support option 2 just because it's a balance of costs going up and providing services that are most used. Thanks.
Councillor Matrosovs.
Thank you. Through you, the warden. It does concern me that we're relying on the comprehensive survey that was done in 2021, because 2021 was so very much in the thick of COVID, and people were electing to minimize their contact with people, in particular in a small vehicle in public transportation. And I recognize the employers were thinking the same thing. My question through the warden to our presenter is, what has been done, being new to the table, what has been done in the past, or what can be done in the sense of urgency to track the data of the people who are not electing to use the service? So I like the fact that you've now got a checkbox on why you're booking your trip. I think that's going to be very useful. My concern is that, for example, in the route number 6, which is in question, I'm looking at the schedule, and that's not going to accommodate a work schedule. So, getting that information, I am electing not, I've come to your website, I can't book a trip. Please tell us why. Is it because of the range of the scheduling? Is it because of the route? Is it because it doesn't match your workforce engagements and commitments, or your medical appointments? Because so many of our residents in Grey County have to go outside their own community in order to get the specialists, or in order to get the other kinds of appointments they need. So what has been done through the warden, and what could be done in the sense of urgency that this may be voted, we may be voting to shut this system down, this Route 6 down by March 2023, not to preclude the conversation that could happen between now and then, but to create that urgency and say, it's not going to work for a workforce down there unless something changes.
Through you, Warden, to Councillor Matrosovs. The main reason that people don't continue with the booking is one, frequency. So they, you know, if they have a doctor's appointment, they can get to their doctor's appointment, but then they have to wait to come back. So that is one of the reasons. And that's cost prohibitive, right? We just, if we had more money, we'd run the bus more often, but that's the main reason we just don't run it as often as we would like to. The other reason is Grey County historically has not had transit. So a lot of people have vehicles and access to vehicles, and it's a convenience thing. So the world of transportation is new for a lot of our residents. So it's simply educating them on the fact that we have this service. Additionally, and this is an open thing that we all are aware of, is the bus doesn't go down all the side roads. Our grant doesn't allow for that. And again, funding wouldn't allow for that. But if you don't live on the main roads and you need to get to an appointment, you most likely are either driving yourself or having someone drive you, or accessing our specialized transit services who pick you up at your front door, drop you off at your appointment and wait for you, and then take you back home. So there is an option for some people who would like to get to medical appointments that is already served by services within Grey County. And some municipalities are already paying into those services through municipal tax dollars as well.
I have Councillor Nielsen and then DeBreen.
Councillor Matrosov brought up kind of the question I was going to bring, which was the timing and operation of the transit itself kind of limits the ridership usage. The Route 6 runs from Flesherton to Hanover, which I would think if you're in terms of economics, Hanover being a larger economic center is going to have the workforce need compared to what Flesherton offers for jobs. You're leaving at 9:03 a.m. and you're arriving in Hanover at 9:43. So in terms of that employment option, that doesn't really work. And then you're having the bus return to Flesherton for 4:53 p.m. So you're really limiting that ability for somebody to go for a work placement or trying to encourage that aspect. You look at the situations we have across Grey County with labor force, where housing in the areas where the labor is needed doesn't meet the cost or effectiveness for the people to be able to afford that, given the price of earnings, right? So I just think that I guess my question to staff would be, has there been a thought to review the ridership timing and trying to reflect usage pattern that would more facilitate employment? I know for Grey Highlands, our largest employer does operate their own bus from Owen Sound to their facility specifically for the labor market. They need the workers, and that's where their workers are. So
through you, Warden, to Councillor Nielsen. Yes, we're always open to having those conversations to change the schedule. The schedule was set pre-COVID to be one thing, then COVID happened, we modified the schedule, we added some new stops and we changed the schedule again. To be fair, the system is very new, so it's going to take some time to get it right. Additionally, with only having the bus run 3 times a day, like up one way and then back again, you are very limited with how many times or when you can run that bus. And what we're trying to do is help people connect into Route 1 and Route 2 so they can go, to Orangeville or go to Owen Sound. If we change Route 6, they're going to start to miss those connections to go beyond. So it is quite the puzzle to shift everything around and get it correct. But yes, always open to having those conversations and seeing what could be done to improve our service.
Councillor DeBreen.
Thank you, Warden. And the discussion is very interesting. I want to thank staff for being adaptable to the needs and the demands that have, as it has been rolled out. This all started with funding that Southgate got and the county got to create that route down Highway 10. Certainly, we need to delegate to the minister to see if we can certainly get transportation up Highway 10 at the very least, with all the growth that they're pushing our way. I think that in the question of the route and what service that we're considering, if we were to notify that we're canceling Route 6, it might be the impetus to get others to the table, Bruce County. For one, Bruce Power, other municipalities. And I think from a budgeting perspective, we know that it's not sustainable as it is currently, and we'll have the time for staff to evaluate how we can adapt that route if funding were available. I think if we approve that we're going to stay with the status quo and we're building that into the budget, there's no need for anyone to come to the table to save it.
Thank you. Councillor Mackey is next, and then Eccles.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Thanks, Stephanie. I believe a few years ago when we were first looking at Gray Transit, you had also mentioned a Wellington model that was point to point. And, you know, in light of some of the conversations here today with the number or the few riders that we have on a number of our buses on a regular basis, is there any opportunity to revisit the way we're doing business and look at a point to point? I think there's 5 member municipalities sitting around this table that are with the Saugeen Mobility, which is point to point, quite successful. Certainly an increased charge. I think 55 cents a kilometer and $7.50 minimum. So, you know, typically someone from Chatsworth going to the Owen Sound Hospital is likely paying $30, let's say. So quite a bit more than what you know, our riders in the Gray Transit are paying at $5, but the program is there for people that really need to get somewhere for a medical appointment, for social activities, but there's an increased cost which limits the amount that the municipalities are paying. So I guess my question is, what's Wellington doing now, and is that something that we could look at? Thanks.
Through you, Warden, to Councillor Mackey. I have actually spoken to Wellington County. They are operating their system through staff and they have a consultant. So I have spoken with them. I'm waiting just to get their most recent budgets and ridership information. They were presenting to their council, I believe in November. So once I can get access to that, I can share it with all of you as well. Yes, the answer is yes. We don't have to do it this way. We can come up with something else and do it a different way. It's just the grant funding provides for it to look like this. That being said, we can modify it and switch to other models that could be cheaper on our tax base. However, the Wellington County model, it works and they are finding it successful. We will see that we won't be able to serve as many people because the Wellington County model has sedans. They use cars. So at most you would be able to fit like 2 to 3 people, maybe 4 in it. And our buses can fit more people in there. And also you're now starting to travel a larger geography. If we continue to travel the current patterns that we do, like into Bruce and into Dufferin. If we want to just stay within Gray, that could be a completely different option. When we started this system, like before, way at the very beginning, I did look at that option to go with exactly what Wellington County was doing. It is more expensive because you have to invest in technology like the ride sharing app, and you have to have that piece on its own. And then you also have to have the vehicles and you have to have a driver. So it is more expensive than the model that we have, but it could be scaled to X price if that was something that we wanted to explore. Also recently, I've been in discussions with Saugeen Mobility and Home and Community Sports Services and Bruce County. All 4 of us are at the same table. Saugeen Mobility and Home and Community Sports Services have new management. So those conversations are now occurring again of how do we work together? How do we reduce vehicles traveling in different places, and how do
Somehow your microphone, probably it was me, but
how do we use Saugeen Mobility to collect the individuals that are living in the rural areas and bring them to the main corridors and fill our buses more? So those conversations are happening. They just simply take time.
Through you, Mr. Warden, to Ms. Stewart. just a little technical. What is considered a ride from, let's just say, Priceville to, or is there a pickup even in Priceville? That's a pretty large area geographically. Flesherton to Durham, that would be considered a ride. So that's one ride. The individual gets off in Durham, catches the bus and going back to Flesherton, that would be another ride. So I guess one individual in the day making that trip from Flesherton, say it was for a medical trip to Durham, that's not one, that's two rides, one individual, but two rides. So the numbers we've seen here are escalated. What have we got? 300 and some odd rides on 6, give or take. But truly, there's a good possibility that that's really one person just going to and back, correct?
Through your word into Councillor Eccles, there's two ways that you can look at this. You can look at it as unique riders or like rides. Each person, typically, if you ride the bus one way, you've got to get on the bus to come back. So a trip, what we count as a trip is you go there, you come back. I have the ridership broken down into where we're picking people up and where we're dropping them off. So for example, if you drop 5 people off here and we pick in Durham and we drop 5 people off in Durham, that we count that as 5. We don't count that as 10 because it's not 10 people. It's really 5 people who got on and got off. So you can look at it two ways, but at the end of the day, it's one person getting on the bus and going there and coming back. We count that as one rider who took 2 trips.
Microphone.
If could, that's exactly it. And I mean, that's what we're on the political side of it. That's what we're looking at right here. What's the impact? The impact isn't 300. If that's what the ridership is in the month, quite frankly, it's 150 persons. I guess that's what I'm looking at, how much have we doubled or whatever it is, but it's one person going, that's a ride. Same person coming back is another ride. But when I look at it, that's just a trip the way it should be. The numbers are a little bit convoluted. I'll leave it at that.
Through your word into Councillor Eccles, to answer your question, the numbers that I have presented in front of you are accurate. They are not. If I wanted to do it the way you were saying, they'd actually be doubled. So if it's 150, it would actually be 300 if you're counting it as a there and a back. I've counted it as the person went there and went back, and that's one person, one round trip is the way I've counted it. So you'd actually double the numbers in the chart if you wanted to count it as a there and a back. You know what I mean?
I think rather than debate the semantics of it, we're 6 of one, half a dozen the other, but I'll allow you another shot at it, Mr. Eccles, please be brief.
So what is the ride? The ridership is that counted back and forth, or what the numbers I'm looking at, that's what I wanted to know. Is it a ride from Flesherton to Durham? That's a ride. That's what that one of those numbers are. Coming from Durham and going back to Flesherton would be counted as another ride. There's some numbers right there. Flesherton to Walkerton. Let's take June, 141. Right? So that is the ridership or the individual?
Through your word into Councillor Eccles, that is the 141 individuals rode the bus. That would be 282 individual rides. If you wanted to, you'd have to double it to get the Flesherton to Durham was 1, and then back from Durham to Flesherton is 2. I've counted that as one person. I'm counting the people, not the trips. This is the people, the amount of people. Perhaps.
Because I remember working with Smart Transit and it's done differently there. If I'm correct. Counselor Dickard, they count it as trips. You go there, it may be 4 days that you stay there and then you come back. So it's counted as trips, but this is counted as individuals that we're looking at on a monthly basis. Okay. How it is clear.
Thank you. Counselor McKay. Mackey. I was hoping to get a week out before I made that mistake, but anyway, sorry.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Warden. Stephanie, we've heard some different numbers. I think what we really want to know is our vans are 10-seaters, correct? How many people on average are sitting in one of those seats per trip? I mean, I've heard 0.5, I've heard, and then we got into rides. If it's a 10-passenger bus, do we have one person on average riding, 2 people on average riding? How many do we have on average riding? Thanks.
Through your Warden to Councilor Mackey. I almost did it too. I don't have the average, but what I do know is there are no buses running empty. They always have people on them, whether it's 1 or 10. I can tell you that we have started to reach capacity on Highway 10, running between Owen Sound and Orangeville. Those buses are starting to be full, and we are encouraging people to always book in advance because there's a chance that you may not be able to get home or to where you want to go. We've also started sending a larger vehicle down between Dundalk and Orangeville to make sure that we can accommodate all the people that are needing to travel into the GTA. However, there are times where there is only a few people on the bus, but there are times that it is full. So I can get you that number. I just don't have it right today.
Okay, I think I don't want to stifle discussion here, but we don't want to talk about this all day either. So Counselor Gregg.
Appreciate the last opportunity. A few years ago, I'm aware that, and it's public information, it's in reports, Saugeen Transit's average ride cost was approximately about $55, $56. In Owen Sound, we're probably between $5 to $6 per ride. Have you got an approximate value that you can provide for council here today on what the cost per ride is to the municipality?
Through you, Warden to Councillor Gregg, I do not have that today in front of me. And my colleagues aren't prepared with that number either. So we don't have that for you today. What I can say is it's very challenging to quantify transit. It is never going to recover its cost. I'd encourage everyone to look at the quality of life and the difference it's making in people's lives versus the dollar amount, because if we look at dollars, you're right, it probably wouldn't be affordable, but it's more than dollars.
Counselor Pringle.
Thank you, Warden. Just a quick comment on the corridor of running Owen Sound to Dundalk. You're saying 4 trips a day. Is that 4 physical trips down and back, or is that Owen Sound to Dundalk is 1, Dundalk back to Owen Sound is 2? So is there actually 2 round trips, or is there actually 4 round trips?
Through your Warden to Councillor Pringle. So the bus leaves Owen Sound and goes to Orangeville. That counts as 1, and then it does 4 in total. So you can get to Orangeville 4 times, and you can get home from Orangeville 4 times. Yeah, so a round trip, yeah.
So the majority of those people on those, do we know, are they going for work?
Through your Warden to Councillor Pringle, the answer is yes and no. Monday to Friday, the GO bus runs to Orangeville. So I do know people are taking that to continue on to the GTA. I do know that people are using it for work. They work at long-term care homes. They work at the restaurants that are available as well. And they're also attending school. And so we have in residents in Dundalk that go to school at the Georgian College in Orangeville. And so they travel that way as well. So there's a variety of reasons that people are using the service.
I guess my question is do we need the 4 times or need the 4 times a day? And the way you're presenting it, we probably do. I'm just wondering if there's a distinction between people working full-time needing a ride and people needing to get an appointment is a separate issue. And if there's a different way of separating that transit piece to accommodate both sides. We don't need a bus to run somebody to the doctor appointment that they got to go to in Owen Sound. But that might be their option to get there, but there is other options for us to get that person there that's not on the bus. I guess I wonder if there's a distinction. You know, are we looking after people going to work or are we just helping people to get to an appointment? Obviously we need both services. I'm just not sure if it can be streamlined a little more.
Through your warden, Council Pringle, the answer is yes, it could obviously be streamlined more by making those partnerships stronger between Saugeen Mobility and Home and Community Support Services. Individuals looking to not go to work, go to an appointment. Not everybody is eligible for our specialized transit services, so that there are some people who fall through the cracks and just aren't eligible for it. But it is possible to definitely streamline it and be kind. You could also switch to like a Go Transit model where you run 2 trips in the morning and 2 trips at night and kind of just do the shuttle for the employment and nothing happens during the day. But if you take away anything that happens during the middle of the day, you reduce people's ability to socialize and just get out and get groceries and just do typical day-to-day activities.
Okay, Councillor Hutchison, did you have something?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden. Just a real quick question. I'm just trying to put this together. I recall when we did all this, does the grant have us kind of locked in at a specific rate that we're supposed to target? Was one question. Okay, so because of the way I was looking, and that just answered, I was looking at it an increase. Now, this one here I know is not part of the grant, but have we looked at increasing the cost of that lane? And if, again, you just answered, if we could increase the other lanes to help supplement, but if I think the grant's dictating what the cost of riders or the cost of person. Thank you.
Through your warden to Councillor Hutchinson, just a point to be made to that is yes, we could always increase the cost on this route. I could always ask the province if I have permission to increase the cost or the fare to the rider. Something to be aware of is, say on Route 6 in November, we had 91 people go on the bus. If I increase the cost to them, that only puts in, say by $1, that only puts $1 back in our pocket. I can't really do a whole lot with $91 extra. So to be frank, it sometimes increasing the cost, the fare is going to harm more of our riders than it would benefit us. So it's a tricky kind of, what's that bubble? How far do you push it? If we had the population like Toronto, where you have millions of people and you increase by 50 cents, yeah, it makes a huge difference. But because of the population size we're working with, I'd be cautious to raise any fares because I think it would hurt our riders more than it would benefit us.
Okay, Councillor Kentner.
Thank you, Warden Milne. I just think we're sort of looking at this through the silo of public transit. And I really would like to hear something from the economic development side. And I wonder what Savannah would tell us, because the difference between the status quo and going back to the basic is really less than the price of one small house. And when you look at the potential economic development of what we're doing here in this huge county, I just would like to hear more about what the economic development potential is, because we're talking about people going to work, people going to education, people going to hospital, people going shopping. There must be another angle that we're kind of missing, is my thought. Thank you.
Through your warden to Councillor, I can go first, and then Savannah, if you have anything you'd like to add. I do know that there is an economic development significant impact there. I don't have obviously all the details like Savannah would, but in speaking with the YMCA and speaking with the United Way, we have their full backing. And recently I was at their employment and income meeting, and the United Way said they would happily write a letter. They represent 52 organizations within Grey and Bruce County, and they would write one on behalf of all those organizations to say that this is making a significant impact in people's lives. For employment and all of the other reasons like you just listed. So in the past, when the 4-County Labor Board, in speaking with them, they said we needed to increase to 5 days a week on most of our routes or all of our routes. So that way people who finish their career development programs with them are able then to actually apply for a job, because they finish the program, but then if it doesn't run enough days a week, then they can't actually continue on and seek employment. So in those conversations, I have heard that it is needed for employment, and I'll pass it to Savannah.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Councillor Kentner, for the question. We definitely hear about transportation as key to economic development, but I can tell you that as we're watching the numbers grow in GTR, we have heard that less because it doesn't seem to be top of mind as housing is, where there's still a lot of work to be done. And I know Stephanie's done so much work working with our employers to try and find routes that fit. And I know Kim has done the same thing, where she'll get a call from an employer saying, you know, if you could just adjust this by 20 minutes, we could probably see a huge difference. And we've been able to make that work. So we have seen GTR absolutely assisting on an economic development side. And it is also providing more access to people who wouldn't otherwise be able to participate. So remember when we talk about unemployment rate and the participation rate, those folks who are actually actively looking for work, having transit allows people to actively look for work because it takes that barrier of access out. And we know there's a lot of commuting that happens around Grey County. And we're hoping in 2023 that we can do another study, because it's been 5 years since we did our last commuting study to see where people live versus where they work. But we absolutely, transportation is key. It is housing, transportation, childcare. Those are the kind of the 3 barriers that we often hear about, but we really do appreciate all of the work that Stephanie has been doing, because we do hear about it less, which is good news for us.
Okay, real good discussion. Councillor Carlton.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. My question is, if we opt to go with option number 2 and we discontinue Route 6, that's not going to discontinue until the end of March. Does that give us 3 months to get some other partnerships? And if we could get those partnerships going, we could then extend Route 6, or are we giving notice and we would be discontinuing it right away?
My understanding of the motion is that we would give notice that the route would discontinue at the end of March. But in the intervening time, as CEO Wingrove pointed out, I think there is time to get with the directly affected municipalities in the 2 counties to try to put their heads together. And I think the point was made, Councillor DeBreen, that that would create that impetus for people to come to the table. Nothing focuses somebody like a deadline. So is that clear? Good. So in the absence of any further discussion, to be clear, the motion is, as we just described there, to eliminate Route 6 at the end of March. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you very much, Savannah. Normally, we don't drill somebody quite so hard as that, but you provided very good answers, and we thank you for that. Would anybody else like a break? All right, let's break and we'll come back at 10 to 12. All righty. That was a well-received break. So we'll bring the meeting back to order. The next item of business is the Grey County Gallery Design Services Award. Jill Patterson, the manager of the Museum and Archives, is here to present. Good morning, Jill. Welcome. Yes, it is still good morning. Normally, we'd have Scott Taylor in this slot, but
He's coming.
he's coming. Yeah, I know. But nonetheless, we're happy to see you. So the floor is yours.
There we go. Thank you very much, Warden, and good morning, Grey County Council. So I'm happy to report that we were successful in receiving our 140,000 grant ask from Canada Cultural Spaces. This money is supporting the fabrication and installation of the Abundance section of the Grey County Gallery currently being installed, and the design work for the remaining sections of the gallery. These sections are known as Connection, Permanence, and Hope. With funding now in hand, we are seeking your approval to move forward with the remaining design work. Origin Studios was hired to complete the design work for Abundance. And to give you an idea of the improvement that this design has brought, what was in the old agriculture section had about 27 artifacts, and this new design puts about 101 artifacts in that section alone. So when we're done, there's going to be hundreds and hundreds of artifacts on display. Given the relationship and the knowledge built with Origin Studios, staff believe it will be most efficient and effective to complete the remaining sections of the gallery redesign, maintaining a continuous look and feel throughout. Furthermore, the timeline required through the funding agreement is conducive to maintaining this relationship. Staff intend to pursue Canada Cultural Spaces Fund for the fabrication and installation of the 3 sections in 2024. As such, the design work including full technical drawings are required to be completed by the fall of 2023. Pre-budget approval to award the design contract will ensure enough time to complete this necessary first step and prepare for further funding applications. The estimate received from Origin Studio for the design work for the remaining 3 sections is 100,400 net HST. The Canada Cultural Spaces Grant will cover 47,300 of these costs, with the remaining costs being funded from the Grey Roots Gallery Reserve in the amount of 39,900 and the balance of 13,200 coming from the 2023 Grey Roots capital budget pending council approval. We would like to request council approval to proceed with awarding the single source contract to Origin Studios ahead of the approved 2023 budget in order to meet timelines required for further grant applications towards fabrication and installation. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
And just before we go to any questions, well, I'll ask for a mover and seconder to approve the recommendation. Councillor Carlton, Councillor McKay. Great. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much, Joe. Now we have Hiba, and she's on the screen. Good morning, Hiba. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Council. I'm good. How are you?
Excellent, excellent, good. So the motion or the issue in front of us is a report dealing with Delbrook Plan, a subdivision and information report. Would someone care to move that? Councillor Nielsen, Councillor Pringle. Hiba, the floor is yours.
Yes, I'm sorry. You're going to have to wait for one more presentation before you get to Scott. Just pulling that up. Good morning, Council. My name is Hiba Hussain. I am the senior planner at the county, and I'm here today to present on a proposed plan of subdivision called the Delbrook Plan of Subdivision. Just before I get into the specifics of the Delbrook subdivision, I just wanted to give a quick overview of what an information report is. So an information report generally provides County Council with an initial review of an application that has been submitted to the County Planning Department. Typically, these reports provide highlights regarding the initial proposal, background information on the development, and a brief high-level analysis of planning policies. These reports are intended to give council information on proposed developments within the county. In the past, these reports have been helpful in keeping council updated on what's happening in our communities and are able to answer questions from the public if they receive any regarding that development. No decision is made at this stage in the process, so we're not here today to ask a judgment on this proposal. Here, staff are generally looking for early thoughts if council has any, or ask any questions on the proposal. Future addendum reports will be brought forward to council as the development moves through the planning process. So moving forward, these information reports will be placed on the consent agenda. If there are any questions or concerns regarding that proposal or development, council has the ability to pull the report and bring forward for discussion. As the development moves forward, staff will bring forward additional reports that will provide updates on the development and seek council's decision. In terms of the Delbrook subdivision, so this is just a quick map or overview of where the subject lands are located. It's in the northeast quadrant of Markdale. It's the civic address, or it's locally known as 101 Main Street East. Historically, these lands have been used for agricultural purposes, but today it is a vacant piece of land. The proposed development include the lands are approximately 8.4 hectares in size. The developer is proposing to have 24 semi-detached residential units and 130 townhouse dwelling units. They are proposing a stormwater management block, which will also include environmental lands. They are proposing 3 future development blocks and 3 unnamed municipal roads. A zoning amendment to the Municipal Grey Highlands zoning bylaw will be required at a future date. The subject lands, as mentioned, front onto Grey Road 12. The lots will be serviced by municipal water and sewer, and a number of technical reports and studies have been submitted to support the plan of subdivision. This is a quick review of the plan or a quick local overview of the proposed subdivision. So I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but Street A, Street B, which will connect to Bradley Street, and Street C, which will connect to Lawler Drive, are intended to be municipal roads. Block 1, Block 2, and they've labeled it as Block 9 are going to be the future development blocks. Block 3A and Block 3B are going to be the stormwater management and environmental lands block, and the rest will be made up of the townhouses and the semi-detached units. Just a quick caveat, as mentioned, this is the draft concept plan that's currently been submitted to be reviewed by various agencies, including the municipality and the Conservation Authority. Future changes to the concept plan that you have in front of you will be required if comments come back from those agencies requesting changes. In terms of next steps, the application, as mentioned, has been circulated to neighbors and agencies for review and comment. At this time, no public meeting has been scheduled for this application. Once a future public meeting has been scheduled in the new year, we will send out a notice to the public. Once that public meeting has occurred, a detailed planning analysis and a staff recommendation will be brought forward to council. So our recommendation today is that this report regarding the subdivision application 42T 2022-04 on the lands described as Part Lot 101, Concession 1, northeast of the Toronto and Sydenham Road in the geographic township of Artemisia in the municipality of Grey Highlands, municipally known as 101 Main Street, be received for information. And I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Hiba. Any questions regarding that report? Not seeing any. You fooled them all, Hiba. Excellent. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Addendum to PDR CW 0319 Long Point Road Subdivision Final Report. Scott Taylor, Director of Planning. Good morning. Yeah, it's afternoon now. Oh, yeah, we need to have a motion before we go any further. Who would like? Councillor Mackey, Councillor Dickert. Scott, floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, Warden Milne and members of the committee of the whole. It may feel like a planning committee meeting for the next couple of reports. We do have a lot of planning agenda items here today, but I appreciate your patience as we go through some of these. So what we have before you is almost the opposite of what HIBA just presented. HIBA presented you a subdivision that was at the very beginning of the process. We're just going out to the public on this subdivision. This is one that with our partners at the Town of Blue Mountains has been through the process. So we've had the public meeting, we've had the detailed review and comments and everything else. There have been changes made to the subdivision, and now we're looking at a recommendation for approval from the committee of the whole. And just as a bit of a subdivisions 101, what we're recommending today is what's called draft approval. Draft approval is issued to subdivisions and sometimes condominiums with a series of conditions that need to be met. This, if you like, marks the end of the public process, marks the end of generally the council process at the county level. And should this subdivision or any subdivision be draft approved, there would be a series of conditions that need to be met by the developer before they can register the lots and start building homes. That registration process is a staff delegated approval at the county level. So this is council's last opportunity for this particular subdivision in that regard. And so what we have before us is a proposed subdivision in the Town of Blue Mountains. It is in the northeastern end of the town. You can see it highlighted there in the dotted red lines. Directly across Long Point Road is the County of Simcoe and Collingwood. The lands are immediately north of Highway 26 and the Grey Road 21 intersection there. You can see there's a mixture of residential lots already there. There's the water treatment plant further to the north, and then there's future development lands that have been draft approved to the west of this subject subdivision. The proposed subdivision is planning to create 22 detached residential dwellings. There'll be a new street as well as an open space and environmental protection block. The lands will be serviced by municipal water and municipal sewer services. The lots will all front off of a newly created road, and I'm going to show you that in just a second. It's important to note that normally when we're looking at subdivisions, we always try to aim for through roads and connected roads. In this case, it is a cul-de-sac, and the reason it is a cul-de-sac is because some of the environmental features in the area, when we had our environmental peer reviewer look at this application, it was thought that it's best not to try to traverse the road through some of these features. The lands are in a designated settlement area in both the town official plan as well as county official plan, and the Town of Blue Mountains has supported this subdivision through their recommendations of draft plan conditions and just recently dealt with the zoning amendment application. So what you see before you is the subdivision. You see it connecting to Long Point Road. That block 25 at the west end of the subdivision is the environmental protection and open space block there, and then you see the 22 lots coming off the cul-de-sac. In terms of the comments that were received on the subdivision, we heard a lot of agency and public comments on this one. Town of Blue Mountain staff did a wonderful job in summarizing the comments and responding to the comments in their staff report. So as not to duplicate efforts, we've linked to their staff report in that regard. There were some additional comments that were received that weren't included in the town's report, so we provided a brief summary in our county staff report. There were some concerns about the environment and the impact of loss of habitat. And if I scroll back a bit, you will note that the subdivision is currently, or the subject lands are currently treed, and there are some environmental features on site. The developer did do an environmental impact study, and then we had the town and the county jointly retained a peer reviewer to look at this, and the peer reviewer worked back and forth with the author of that environmental study in that regard. There's a requirement in the town's plan for 40% open space. There was some public asking questions about whether or not that had been met. In this case, through that open space and environmental block, the developer is providing 25% open space, and they'll be providing about 15% cash in lieu. There were some concerns regarding lot coverage. In this case, the lot coverage is not being amended through the town zoning bylaw, so they are going with what's already permitted by the zoning. And there were some concerns regarding the height. This particular area of the town has a fairly high water table. As such, basements are not recommended for obvious reasons, I guess. And so the developer had asked for a slight increase. In the end, what's being supported is a 2.5 story home up to a maximum of 9.5 meters. It's noted that this is generally in keeping with the character of the area, and across the road in Collingwood, the homes there are allowed up to 12 meters. So this didn't seem out of character with the area. There were detailed comments from the Grace Harbor Conservation Authority that advised us where the natural hazards were on site. There was comments from both the Ministry of Transportation and the town's engineering staff with respect to the concerns about the intersection of Grey Road 21, Highway 26, and Long Point Road. And then there was other concerns about impact on the area and overdevelopment of the area. Staff would note that anytime you're seeing new homes being built or a new subdivision, it is going to be change. And for people living in that area, that change can be in some cases intimidating or frightening. In this case, based on the density proposed, we don't see this as a huge imposition on the area. No doubt there will be a few more cars on the road and some new houses. But again, the density of the proposed development did seem to be in keeping with the existing residential character of that area. There was also concerns and questions raised about the infrastructure capacity. And this has resulted in detailed discussions and review by the town's engineering staff to make sure that not only the roads, but also the water and sewer and everything else is there in place to support the future development in this regard. As I noted, there were a number of technical reports here. They were reviewed by staff, and in some cases, the peer reviewer, like the environmental report. We relied on comments from agencies like the Conservation Authority and the Niagara Escarpment Commission, and our various utilities and everything else. Staff are recommending support for this one, subject to the draft plan conditions. And we would note that the draft plan conditions are very, very detailed, and they do address some of those comments that the public may have. And so at this stage, the developer has demonstrated through the reports submitted to date sort of the proof of concept and that everything will work. It's that detailed engineering and that further draft plan conditions that really flesh out that detail in that regard and make sure that things like stormwater and everything else are being appropriately managed. Staff are satisfied that with the recommended draft plan conditions, this subdivision has regard for matters of provincial interest under the Planning Act. It's consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the Niagara Escarpment Plan, the county plan, and the Town of Blue Mountains official plan. As such, we're recommending that the report be received and that the draft plan be draft approved, subject to the conditions set out in the notice of decision, which are attached to the report. That's all I have on this one, but certainly be happy to take any questions if council has any in that regard.
Thank you, Scott. Councillor Mattress.
Thank you, Warden. Through you, I would like to preface my comment that I'm not questioning the recommendation that's herein on the report and has been moved and seconded, but I do wish to pose a question of clarification. At the bottom of page 39, there's reference to section D, which is the suitability of land for the purposes for which it is to be divided. D1, if any affordable housing units are proposed, the suitability of proposed units for affordable housing. And the response that we have here in the staff report cites this area of the town is not the best suited for affordable housing, given the lack of other complete community attributes and the limits on development density that applies to these lands. So without the density question, the first part of that statement does concern me. If I could please have a clarification about you've mentioned affordable housing. So are you specifically referring to geared to income housing, or are you lumping into that attainable housing as well? So providing a mix of housing for a mix of people that have incomes at various levels.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Mattress, and through you, Mr. Warden. So with respect to the comments in the staff report, that is specifically speaking to affordable housing and prior to the recent passing of Bill 23, the definition for affordable housing, and that's still in the provincial policy statement, is contained within the provincial policy statement, and that's mimicked in our county official plan. In the county official plan and in the provincial policy statement, we don't currently have a definition for attainable housing. We have kind of a colloquial understanding that attainable housing might be somewhere between affordable, which would be on the lower end, and sort of the higher end market rate housing. But we don't have that definition. In this regard, with respect to some of my comments in the staff report, normally we first and foremost look for our affordable housing close to areas of employment and close to areas of other, in some cases, social services that might help support the residents of that housing. And while this is a designated settlement area, and while it's fairly close to Collingwood and fairly close to the Blue Mountain Resort, it doesn't have some of the amenities that you might in a more traditional settlement area, like a Thornbury or an Owen Sound or a Hanover in that regard. So staff haven't viewed this as ideal for affordable housing. Certainly if somebody was proposing some, we wouldn't turn anyone away in that regard. But if we're looking at even, funding criteria from groups like the CMHC, typically they have a range of needs that would best support affordable housing. I can't say that this area of the town has all those needs in place. The other thing I'd point out here, and Councillor Matrosov, obviously you're very familiar with the town's official plan. Some of our newer members of county council may not be. There are limits on density in these recreational resort areas. And that's why a number of these areas have developed traditionally over the years with largely single detached dwellings. And while not the case in all locations, single detached dwellings typically don't support affordable housing unless maybe they have an additional residential unit or secondary suite contained within that might be rental. But given the limits on density, we couldn't really ask this developer to step things up and to put in things like townhouses or apartment buildings here because that would be above and beyond what the town official plan supports there. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but if not, I can take another shot at it.
Thank you. Through the warden, if I may have a follow-up. Thank you for highlighting the difficulty in the definitions. It's not a Grey County thing. It's not a municipalities thing. It's a province-wide issue that we still have this uphill battle on defining the difference between attainable and affordable housing. Affordable in the sense of the way I interpret affordable. I'm not disagreeing with the statement that's here. Unfortunately, on a broad read, that's also missing the mark and the opportunity for us to highlight that any of the areas in our settlement areas are suitable for attainable housing. So too often I'm hearing this kind of scenario lumped in with, but there's no transit, so that person can't get to work. We have attainable housing workforces who have their own vehicles because they run their own businesses, they have professional level incomes, and they would be fine here. This would be great. And with regards to the density, yes, if we're stuck with single detached, but on the other hand, we do have these innovative differences coming from the province, as well as we've already built in within our municipality, and I'm sure others, that a single detached dwelling can actually accommodate two different units living there by adding an accessory apartment in it. So there are options even when the density is not showing up and we're looking at building more of the same. So I do want to keep that dialogue moving because we spent 4 years in our municipality trying to define the difference between affordable housing and attainable housing and how we can meet that gap that's missing in the middle. Thank you.
Any other questions? Not see, Councillor Eccles.
Interesting on the density level. With the new Bill 23, and I think this was even prior to Bill 23, was building a second unit on the same lot. How's that going? Is that overriding there when we start talking about attainable or affordable housing in the areas? But then there's a 40% lot density factor built into that. If you put the second unit on that lot, would they qualify for a second unit? And how's that going to affect on the 40% lot density coverage?
So through you, Mr. Warden, thank you for your question, Councillor Eccles. So just taking a step back here, traditionally, the county official plan and most of our member municipalities that I'm aware of haven't treated or haven't counted the secondary suites or additional residential units, as they're now called, in the lot density, because at the time of approval of a plan of subdivision, well, we know that they could go in, there's no impetus on a builder or a developer to put them in. So we know that in theory, each of those lots could have, the main dwelling, they could have a coach house above the garage or not a basement apartment in this case, but maybe a ground floor apartment. But we haven't included that in the density. So in theory, if your density was 10 units per gross hectare, you could have 10 dwellings there, but then in each of those dwellings, you could have those additional units, and that's above and beyond the maximum permitted density in that regard. Just a bit of clarification, the 40% in this case is a requirement of the town's plan, which speaks to 40% open space. It's not not necessarily related to the residential density in that regard. But we would hope, although we haven't seen widespread uptake of these secondary suites or additional residential units, we would hope that in any new development, we're seeing some uptake there. And certainly with the province's new rules on making things easier and more as of right, we hope that more builders and landowners will take us up on that offer, if you will.
Okay, any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Scott, you have another report there regarding Blue Vista Plan of Subdivision, Red Line Revision Final Report. Would someone care to move that, please? Councillor Hutchison, Councillor DeBreen. Scott?
Thanks, Warden. So what we have before us is what's called a red line revision. And again, this is another bit of sort of subdivisions 101, if you will. In speaking to the last two reports between him and myself, we had an information report and an addendum report, and those deal with number 1 and number 2 on the slide you see above. So there's the initial submission of the application, we have the draft approval, and then we have the final approval and final registration, and that's when the lots physically get created. A red line revision is where you have a circumstance that a developer has achieved number 2, so they have their draft approval, and now they're looking at making some changes to the draft approval. So those changes could be to the lot or block boundaries on the plan, or they could be recommended changes to the draft plan conditions in that regard. Generally speaking, at the county, we classify these into either a minor red line revision or a major. A minor red line revision is typically where you're not seeing any increases to the number of lots or units being proposed. There might just be a slight tweak to the boundaries or a slight tweak to the draft plan conditions. A major red line revision would be where you have permitted 60 units and now the developer wants 70 kind of thing. And so that's a little bit more extensive in the review process. Under the Planning Act, red line revisions have an abbreviated review process. We don't necessarily need to go out to a new public meeting or a full-on public review in that regard. That said, people that had requested notice on the original decision are circulated on the changes to the application in that regard. What we have before us is the Blue Vista development in Town of Blue Mountains, and similar to the last one, immediately to the east across Grey Road 21 is Collingwood and Simcoe County here. To the west, we have the Second Nature development, and further west is the Blue Mountain Resort, and to the south we have the spa and the Windfall development. The lands are approximately 51 acres in size, and as noted earlier, they are currently draft approved with a plan of subdivision. That current draft approval would allow for 82 detached dwellings, 72 semi-detached dwellings, large amounts of open space, environmental protection, and parkland. And it's worth noting for those newer councillors on here, the town did something really neat here in that they knew that this whole area was going to be developed, and so they focused the parkland for Blue Vista in the southwest corner, which abuts the parkland they took from Second Nature and Windfall, thereby having a larger sort of regional park and bigger bang for your buck, if you will. The only changes to this proposed development in terms of the draft approval are a very minor lot extensions to lots 1 and 2, and I'll show you that in just a second here. These were required based on the fact that when they were doing their detailed engineering work after draft approval, the road widening and the daylight triangle that were going to County Road 21 here resulted in lot 1 being just a little bit smaller than they had anticipated. And so in order to meet the town zoning standards, they are requesting just a slight change here. There's no further zoning amendments or town applications triggered by this red line revision. So what you see before you is the draft plan of subdivision, just to highlight for everyone's benefit. Lots 1 and 2 are on the east end here, south of the new street, immediately west of Grey Road 21. What you see in sort of this blow up is the red line, and you can see they are, literally just extending by a few meters to this lots 1 and 2. So, as far as minor red lines go, this is about as minor as they come. And normally this would be a consent agenda item, and it's something we might even raise with council in the future to see if there's any appetite to look at delegations of some of these very minor ones, so as to free up some of council's time and to create a more efficient approvals process. But that's not what we're asking you here today. We wanted to flag this just to go through a bit of planning 101 and red line 101. With respect to planning analysis, we don't have any outstanding concerns related to the red line revision subdivision. Town of Blue Mountain staff are satisfied. The lots do cut into the stormwater block that's immediately to the south there just a bit. We've had it confirmed by the engineer that this won't impact the functionality of that stormwater block or the functionality of any of the rest of the subdivision. As such, it's our recommendation that this one has regard for matters of provincial interest. It's consistent with the PPS and conforms to the escarpment, county plan, and town official plan in this regard. Therefore, it's our recommendation that the report be received and that the revised draft approval be issued subject to the one minor change to the draft plan conditions that's highlighted at the back of the report here. That's all I have on this one, but certainly happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Any questions on this one? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. The next report is an addendum to the Loon Call Grey Highlands final report, county official plan amendment. Councillor Bordignon, do you want to get in on this party or do you want to? You'll move that. Thank you very much. Is there a seconder? Councillor Nielsen? Scott, she's all yours.
Great, thank you, Mr. Warden. So what we have before us is an update report or an addendum report on Loon Call Grey Highlands. The reason we refer to this as Loon Call Grey Highlands is because there was also a Loon Call Meaford development. And for most of the people around the Horseshoe today, you will remember just as we were coming out of Markdale on our bus tour a week or two ago, we highlighted the subject lands just on the edge of Markdale there. So just a bit of a county official plan amendments 101. County council is the approval authority for all amendments to the county official plan, with the exception of a 5 or 10-year review amendment, which has to get approved by the province. So you know, committee of the whole receives the report and either supports or not the staff recommendation, and then a bylaw would come forward to a subsequent county council meeting if it was supported by committee of the whole. Official plan amendments, although they are amending the official plan, so you can't say they conform to the existing official plan, they do need to be consistent with the provincial policy statement, have regard for matters of provincial interest under the Planning Act. I would note that the county is also the approval authority for most municipal official plan amendments, save and except for some in the city of Owen Sound. Generally speaking, unless it's a complex amendment like a 5-year review amendment, though, that is a staff delegated approval at the county level. In order to permit new development on a property, whether it's a subdivision or anything else, it needs to be demonstrated that any development conforms to official plans, either at the county and or the municipal level. I shouldn't say or, and the municipal levels. Official plan amendments can be processed simultaneously with other development applications. So in this case, we have an official plan amendment at the county level, at the Grey Highlands level. We also have a plan of subdivision and a zoning amendment. But typically speaking, in order to stay on board with the Planning Act, you need the decision on the official plan amendments here first, which is what we're here talking to you today about. These are the subject lands that you see that we saw on the bus tour. They are about 33 hectares in size. What you'll see here is a stormwater management facility that services not only this development, but some of the other developments on this end of Markdale. The little kind of line here is to denote the fact that the sort of south end of that stormwater facility is currently owned by the municipality of Grey Highlands. It's not needed for stormwater management. So there is a proposal from this developer that they would look at developing that half-hectare piece of land there as well. The lands front onto Highway 10, but they also have road connections to Stan Baker Boulevard and Margaret Elizabeth Avenue there in the existing developed portion of Markdale. And so what you see on the map here shows the county official plan designations as they stand today. So what you see in red there is the settlement area designation. That's the primary settlement area. What you see in green is the hazard lands bordering the river. And what you see in white is the rural designation. In this case, the official plan amendment that's before council today is only dealing with this strip of white lands here. It's all part of the subject property, but it's in the rural designation rather than the settlement area designation. That strip of white lands there is approximately 5.3 hectares in size. Through this development, they're not looking at redesignating or developing any of the hazard lands. Those are staying as hazard lands in this regard. For some that might be a little more seasoned here, council may remember that this property, the red portion of this property came into the settlement area of Markdale in 2012 via the county's 5-year review at that time, because there was determined to be a need for additional residential development. And so now approximately 10 years later, we have a proposal on the table for that additional residential development. In terms of the proposed official plan amendment, as I said, it's 5.3 hectares. It's only dealing with that rural portion. The hazard is remaining untouched. The proposed subdivision, which we don't have a recommendation on today, that'll come at a later date, is looking at 469 new residential lots. There'll be parks, open space, walkways, and stormwater management facilities. The proposed development will be entirely serviced by municipal water and municipal sewer services. As per the previous map, most of the lands are already in the primary settlement area, and the fact that this 5-hectare portion of land is a relic of the population projections in the year 2012 when we were dealing with this matter with the province and with the Ontario Municipal Board, and the fact that we weren't projecting as far into the future. They've reassessed those numbers, and these lands are needed to meet Markdale's growth projections in this regard. As I said, there will be a future recommendation on the subdivision. This, just for council's benefit, is what the subdivision will look like. The lands over here are where we're looking at the redesignation. There will be a stormwater facility in there and approximately 51 residential lots that will be in those future lands should they be supported via this amendment. We did get a lot of comments on this application, but the application was partnered with the other zoning amendment, plan of subdivision, and the municipal official plan amendment. So a lot of the comments we heard were more directly applicable to the plan of subdivision. So things like the drainage and the stormwater, those are details that get worked out through that future draft approval and the detailed engineering in that regard. There has been an environmental study done. They are keeping a setback, of course, from the river, and as I said, not going into the hazard lands. There were comments from the Ministry of Transportation with respect to access onto the highway. MTO is not fully satisfied at this point, and there'll be further discussions going on with them, and the developer is actively looking at updating their traffic study in that regard. There were comments about urban sprawl, and that's certainly a relevant topic. In order to justify this amendment, the developer had to go through what's called a comprehensive review process to look at in detail what the needs of the municipality are for their growth needs, and also to make sure that we're using land efficiently. This land is being developed at a higher density than what we see in some other developments across the county, and the push is really on to make sure that we are using those lands and services efficiently in that regard. And so, you know, this was by no means a rubber stamp exercise in terms of just because the developer asked, staff are supporting that additional boundary expansion in that regard. There was also some really interesting comments from the public wondering about how green initiatives can be built into this development. So certainly that's something we'll work with staff from the municipality of Grey Highlands on, and the developer to see what can be considered here that might be in line with our climate change action plan in that regard. With respect to some of the other comments about infrastructure, it will be the developer building the infrastructure in terms of the roads and installing the water and sewer pipes in this development. And there will be development charges that help pay for some of those growth related costs in that regard. There were a number of technical reports reviewed by staff and agencies in this regard. As I said, the proposal, although relatively small in terms of an expansion, it is helping Markdale meet their long-term projected growth needs. Some of you may remember through official plan amendment number 11, we are now projecting growth out to the year 2046. And so although we're looking at 469 new residential units here, the build out of that will take some time and will help meet Markdale and Grey Highlands and Grey County's needs over the long term in that regard. There will be a further detailed analysis done once we have the subdivision application ready for council's consideration. Staff are satisfied that the proposed official plan amendment has regard for matters of provincial interest. It's consistent with the provincial policy statement, and it does maintain the overall goals and objectives of the county and Grey Highlands official plans. Should this amendment be approved at a future county council session, then it's likely that Grey Highlands would come forward with their municipal official plan amendment, which would serve a very similar purpose in this regard. It is worth noting that this matter has been supported by staff and council from the municipality of Grey Highlands. As such, it's our recommendation that the report be received and that a future bylaw be prepared for county council should the committee support the staff recommendation here today. So that's all I have, but if there's any questions, be happy to take any.
Thank you, Scott. Any questions? Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Warden, and to Scott, County Planner. Thank you very much for the report. Question I have, and you talk about density, Bill 23, and development charges. is that an issue that could happen here? And how do we, because Bill 23 talks about development charges, which we talk the lower tier and the upper tier, and they talk about higher density here. Is that something that, because this has started through that process, and I don't know the details of Bill 23, is that something that starts new? Or because this is coming as high density, is that something we need to be concerned about? And I'm just putting you on the spot, but I'm just asking.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Warden. Great points, Councilor McQueen. It's something that we're still trying to figure out as staff. Based on my understanding at this stage, one of the key provisions of Bill 23 that would most likely potentially affect this development would be the provisions and the changes to the Development Charges Act that possibly look at conditionally exempting development charges for affordable or attainable housing. Although Bill 23 is passed, and you'll get a verbal update on this later in the meeting here today, we're still wading through the various impacts to understand what that means. And specifically with respect to the attainable and affordable housing piece, it's our understanding that those provisions of the bill aren't necessarily in effect yet, because the province still has to provide a definition for attainable, and they still have to give us the values for affordable. And so for those that might be new around the horseshoe, Bill 23 sets a new threshold for affordable housing at 80% or less of market value. So in order to solve for X, we need to know what the 100% of market value is. And that's particularly relevant in this development. I should have mentioned this in my presentation. This particular development, Loon Call, specializes in building attainable housing. So depending on where the province sets this threshold, and depending on other factors like supply chain issues and everything else, it's quite likely that a number of these units, although they may or may not come in at the affordable level, could definitely come in at the attainable level. And so depending on when this development is approved, if it ultimately gets approved, and when they might be looking to go for their building permits, it is entirely likely that a number of these units could be conditionally exempted from development charges unless there's further changes or delays to how Bill 23 is implemented. So it's certainly something at the county level and at your own municipal level we'll need to start thinking about in terms of how we're going to be covering some of these lost revenues, if we will, to pay for that development related infrastructure and costs. So the best I can tell you is stay tuned. We'll continue to keep council up to date in that regard. But simply put, not all the details are known just yet.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you, Scott. Just to do simple math, as we have in front of us today, we have the development charge for, well, I guess single detached, and I guess rural housing, and that changes in the sense of what's being proposed here, but we could be looking at $3 million plus from a county wise that could be on the block. So it's speculation now. I just say something that, and maybe that's part of our delegation conversations in January. I'm just saying it's a big chunk of change that's for the county and also ourselves at Grey Highlands. So just your part about high density would be that trigger. Thank you.
Yeah, I dare say anybody that has any development of any account will need to keep close tabs on where this Bill 23 goes to. Randy, do you want to add something?
Just further to Scott's comments, I think some of the challenges, and we're still waiting for some additional information on, as Scott indicated, is how we track and monitor the affordable attainability thresholds once the development has commenced and once the buildings have been built, and ensuring that those remain at affordable attainable levels for what we're assuming is a period of time. There was hint that we would be registering agreements on title with respect to this, and that may be a bit easier when we're talking about rental housing developments, because we're dealing with one property owner being the rental unit owner of the entire, say, apartment complex or building. But when we're dealing with an ownership level, we're dealing with individual property owners, and then monitoring and tracking whether or not those keep at affordable or attainable rates, so that, for example, if a house meets those attainable thresholds day one, but day two that house is sold beyond attainable levels and maybe at market rate, what's then the recourse, so to speak, in terms of potentially collecting those DCs. So these are some of the details that we still are waiting for in terms of trying to figure out how we're going to monitor, track, and enforce the affordable attainability beyond just, as what's pointed out, the loss in terms of DC revenue to pay for infrastructure and to support these developments. So I just wanted to raise that as well.
Thanks, Randy. Councilor McQueen.
Yeah, I'll just wrap up and say thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you, Randy. I mean, we just built a new water tower in Markdale. And we're going through a feasibility study for our waste, which means that we're going to have to do something to probably increase the capacity in order to take the capacity of 469 units. So I guess the thing is if we, you know, they can't move forward until we do that capacity study of our waste. But, you know, it's sort of a chicken and egg, because they want to move forward, but it'll be in phases. And yeah, it's just something that I think it just is right close to home of that Bill 23. Thank you.
Councilor DeBreen.
Thank you, Warden. And thank you, Scott. For someone who is new to the Horseshoe on a relatively new recent basis, I did follow the Loon Call development and am very interested in their ability to deliver on more attainable housing. And you mentioned in your report the lands to be conveyed by the municipality. Will that help contribute to their ability to deliver on more attainable or affordable units? Because I wasn't sure how that land was being conveyed. And I will look forward to the answer to how you prevent an affordable house or attainable house and keep that affordable for a period of time, because I was actually asked that question yesterday with, you know, when we're talking about affordability and attainability, how do we keep those units in that market and prevent someone from, well, I'll just buy this house and I'll flip it in a year. So I'll look forward to that magic answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Councilor DeBreen, and through you, Mr. Warden. I don't have the magic answer just yet, but I will say, and maybe our friends from the municipality of Meaford could speak up here too if they have anything further. We've had extensive discussions with this developer, first starting with their development in Meaford. And one of the neat things that's been happening since they got their approval in Meaford is they've let us in a little bit on how they market and how they sell their units. And their units, simply put, at least the units in Meaford, don't just get sold to the highest bidder. They have an extensive vetting process. Their, you know, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but their philosophy is, you know, everyone deserves a good place to live and safe and everything else. And certainly people that are buying a starter home or buying their first home deserve to also build equity, but they don't want people just buying and flipping. And so at least in the Meaford example, they've even given discounts to locals that are already living and working in this area, in hopes that they'll see more of these people moving in and possibly raising families in these homes, and not necessarily, you know, buying as an investment and flipping. And so, you know, similar to Randy's comments, it is going to be tough going forward, understanding how we track and manage that affordability or attainability rate, and balancing individuals' rights to you know, build equity in their home as we all hope to, but also to make sure that, you know, they're not only affordable on day one and day two, they're already gone, kind of thing. With respect to your comments about, you know, do the municipal lands being conveyed help with attainability here? I think overall there was sort of a practical approach to suggest that, you know, if the lands aren't entirely needed for stormwater management, and if this development will otherwise surround that stormwater pond, what else would they be used for, and would it make sense to include them as part of the residential units in that regard? The developer has been very candid with us in the past. Their ability to produce an attainable unit hinges very heavily on an expeditious approvals process, and working hard to get things done quickly, because the longer they hold the property and carry mortgages on the property, that increases the price to the end user in that regard. So I can't say specifically that half hectare of land has turned the tides in terms of attainable housing, but certainly from a practical perspective, there seems to be some merit to having housing there versus simply an oversized stormwater pond. So not sure if that answered your question, but happy to add anything further if there is anything needed.
Councillor Keaveney.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And Scott, I appreciate your comments about the Loon Call developer. Suresh has been wonderful to work with in Meaford, I can add. And further to your comments, initially when he came into our municipality, he talked about selling me townhomes, 1,100 square feet with a basement, unfinished, single car garage for $299,000. And we were really excited about that. We know that things have changed in the past couple of years and those units will be a little bit more. I don't have a selling price at this point, but they will be over 300,000. But one thing he has shared with us is that he will not allow multiple purchases. You cannot come in and buy 6 units. So he will be very specific about that. I know I asked him, how was he able to build for $299,000? And he talked about efficiencies in building. He has his electricians, for example, who will come in and wire 3 units in one day because they're all the same. The plans are the same, no matter whether he's in here or whether he's in Markdale, and his crew just know how to do it quickly and efficiently without waste and so on. So we are really excited about this project coming to Meaford. It's really going to meet a need for us, and I'm sure it will in Markdale as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Shirley. Anything further, Scott?
Nothing further on mine, Mr. Warden. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Eccles.
Thank you. And it was interesting what you said there. One of the last statements, Scott, that, the developer can get this going and whatnot, and they needed it in an expedient manner. I just can't believe that this wasn't done in a review of the official plan and just thrown in there, that we could have done that very easily in this process to expedite it instead of other things that were surreptitiously included into the last review of the official plan. But that'll be for another day. The housing portion of it, a number of years ago, I sat here and we did housing purchase for individuals. And I think this will be to Councillor DeBreen. There was an affordability issue for first-time homeowners, I believe, and that was probably 10 or 12 years ago. The county got into that there was a down payment was made by the county. And if the home was owned for 20 years, I believe it is, Randy, you remember any of that? Yeah, and I think the program is still going, but what it was at that point in time, there was, I don't know, 15% or whatever the down payment was done that way if the individuals continue to live in the home and whatnot. But it was registered on title. If it was sold, that portion had to be, if it was sold at market rate, and they got out and took their the increase in it, then it was drawn back. I'm wondering if that's anything that can be done, that's out there to address Mr. McQueen's issues with how the development charges, if it flips out of that attainable or affordable and whatnot, and the development charges, but 2 days later it's sold for market rate, that there's a recovery period on that. Be interesting going forward how we're all going to work with Bill 23. Thank you, Dougie.
Yeah, thank you for your comments, Councillor Eccles. And it's certainly something we can look further into. We're looking at strategies to address that. I know in talking to legal services, they had suggested some options when we were putting forth our comments to the province and at that time on the draft Bill 23 on things that the province might be able to do to assist us in that regard. I think further to Randy's comments, one of the challenges here would be potentially the sheer volume of agreements we might need to enter into in that regard. And certainly we'd hope that we could get it down to a fairly templated agreement. But it's a lot different than when we're dealing with one rental owner for 75 units and it's one agreement for 75 versus if we had to enter into 75 individual agreements. But I appreciate those comments and thank you for raising them. We can look further into them. With respect to your comments about why this wasn't included in an official plan review. Official Plan Amendment number 11 was initiated just after this application was submitted. And in fact, the developer in this case asked if it was appropriate just to build it into Official Plan Amendment number 11. And the staff response at that time was because the applications had already been submitted and already gone public. We didn't want to confuse the two as to why it was suddenly being put in a county initiated official plan amendment versus a developer initiated one, which had already been applied for. But certainly as we move forward with future reviews, we can continue to look at our growth needs and work with each of our 9 member municipalities to look at their growth needs and whether or not that's appropriate to build into future reviews in that regard.
Thank you, Scott. Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. So not to break Scott's record of being the last to present before lunch, I'm going to suggest we do break for lunch. It's been here for a few minutes. Let's say we come back at because we got a bit to go yet. Let's say 1:30. Does that work for everybody? All right, we'll recess to 1:30. Thank you. Okay, we'll bring the meeting back to order. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Lunch is always thank you, Sarah. It is always good. The butter tarts are, and Savannah brought the butter tarts. Gotta love that. Gotta love that. So the bar has been set. So the bar has been set. Right? Okay. So moving along, we have a report here regarding county comments on provincial review of a place to grow and provincial policy statement. Liz Buckton. Gee. Okay, I'm not making any friends today. Welcome, Liz. Good afternoon. And the floor is yours. Sorry, I need a mover and seconder for that report. Councillor Patterson, Councillor Pringle.
Thank you very much. We can still be friends. It's okay. Lovely to be here with you all today. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Liz Buckton and I am a registered professional planner. And I recently joined the county this past summer in the role of senior policy planner. And so today I have the opportunity to present to you some of the highlights of the staff report that we have prepared regarding a policy change proposal that is being put forward by the province presently. Oops. There we go. So the province is looking at or considering, I guess, streamlining and consolidating 2 important policy documents that apply within the province of Ontario. They have identified a stated intent for that review, which is to accelerate the development of housing to quickly increase the housing supply. And we understand that this focus then of this review would be to look at removing policy barriers that would apply to housing creation across the province. This work would also take place in the context of the 1.5 million homes by 2030 target that the province is currently pursuing. There is an existing posting on the Environmental Registry of Ontario, and there is a comment period open through December 30th of this year. So I'll start off talking a little bit about the documents that they're proposing to consolidate and streamline. We'll talk a little bit about the comments that staff have highlighted within the report, and then some of the policy concepts that we would like to see maintained within a revised policy document, should they pursue that revision that they're proposing. So with the PPS, this is kind of the key policy document in Ontario's policy-led planning system. It is issued by the province under the authority of the Planning Act, and it offers guidance as a holistic document meant to be read in its entirety. It provides us guidance around prioritization and balancing of the various environmental, economic, and social interrelationships that take place or have to be considered in the planning process. Land use planning decisions in Ontario must be consistent with the provincial policy statement, and strong communities which enhance human health, social well-being, and which are economically, environmentally sound, excuse me, are the priority or the vision that underpins that document. The Place to Grow document is a geographically specific policy document that applies in Ontario. This is established under the Place to Grow Act, and it applies largely to the Greater Golden Horseshoe and surrounding lands, identifying 25 key urban growth centers. And that plan identifies special tools that are available within those communities to drive the intensification that they're seeking. It is an intensification first approach to development and city building, which means they really do try to densify the urban centers before considering expansions beyond those existing boundaries. And that document does include a more prescriptive approach to growth management, population and employment forecasting and monitoring than we see in the PPS generally. It really does, some refer to it as that planning by numbers approach, which is it's very prescriptive in terms of the forecast and then delivery through development projects of a specific number of jobs and persons or units within any specific geographic area. There are rural areas, within that region as well, are subject to the Place to Grow. And there are policies within that document as well that speak to farmland protection and agri-food viability. And there really is a focus there, I guess, kind of looking at how those areas contribute to the broader viability of the overall region. Okay, so we've got the PPS, which applies to all of Ontario. And then we've got the growth plan that applies to that Greater Golden Horseshoe. And my apologies, that should be GGH, not GHG. And I think I've got climate change on the brain with that. But I would suggest, and we would suggest, that those are very different contexts within which planning occurs. So in that Greater Golden Horseshoe context, we are talking about a significant density of population, of infrastructure above and below, transit corridors, various different modes of transportation, lots of activity and stakeholders to all be coordinated in fairly tight geographic spaces. There is a focus around densification adjacent to major transit station areas, and that has to do with establishing mass capacity. I'm saying that wrong. Critical mass, there we go, for those transit systems. And what I would suggest is that in that context, it really is a complex process planning because you're coordinating so many detailed considerations together. In other areas of the province, like Grey County, which are more rural or remote, I would suggest that challenges to that coordinated and strategic planning that we're looking for is really more so a factor of limited municipal resourcing and capacity versus complexity of the issues that we're trying to reconcile through the planning process. And I would say that generally our organizations are smaller, our organizations are flatter, and that is a wonderful benefit to us in many ways. I think that it allows us to be much more nimble than some of those larger organizations. We can pivot and change, but it does rely, or our progress, I guess, relies on our ability to be creative and collaborative in finding solutions to supplement that limited capacity of our organizations. Grey County also is blessed with very resource-rich rural areas. And those areas play a role in terms of food production, aggregate extraction, forestry, and as natural habitat for nature, for all types of flora and fauna. And so with that comes a greater focus then on the protection and maintenance of resources alongside our more traditional urban planning activities which occur in our service settlement areas. So with consideration to these different contexts, staff have pulled together some comments for the province with respect to the policy change that they are proposing. What we would suggest is that certainly there is a place for the provision of additional tools to facilitate affordable housing creation specifically. And we think inclusionary zoning could be one of those tools that we could make really good use of locally. But we would suggest that otherwise the current provincial policy statement and the policy framework generally does not otherwise represent a barrier to housing creation in Grey County. We would suggest that any new tool that's being considered, given our capacity considerations in this area, should be as flexible and as administratively simple as possible. It really shouldn't require a whole lot of data collection locally or analysis to implement. Streamlined, I think, is really the operative word there that we're looking for in that policy. And then we would also advocate for a policy instrument that will maintain the appropriate structure and municipal authority to facilitate that resource protection role alongside that intensification first approach to settlement area planning. Further, being that the PPS does not represent a specific barrier to housing creation in Grey County, we would ask that the province carefully weigh further suggested policy changes that would affect our area against the stated goals of that policy exercise. And so the way that we see it is that our local capacity can really be focused towards that creative collaborative work to create housing and to manage those community changes. Or we can spend a lot of time updating our official plans and our zoning bylaws to reflect the legislative change that in this case may be of marginal benefit to our communities locally. And so I think it's our general suggestion that if the goal is to expedite housing supply, that the former should really be prioritized over the latter. We'd really like to use our capacity to try and directly solve the issues that are at hand. And so that would really be, I think, one of the main takeaways of the report. So I just wanted to touch base, and I've just got a few slides left, just on some of those policy concepts that I think we'd like to maintain within a document that the province, if they move forward. I think generally regarding growth management, so that's the forecasting of population and employment and the associated monitoring. Again, we really just would like a very simple forecasting approach and land need methodology that can be implemented simply with limited resources. We would really like to see in that PPS document an ongoing income tied definition of affordable. I really would suggest that affordable should relate the cost of housing back to the ability of local households to access it. And in some areas in Grey County and in other places of the province, I think it's fair to say that the market rates or pricing is really disconnected from local incomes and the ability for people to access housing in their communities. And so we really feel that income tied definition, in addition to market tied metrics, is going to be important for us to highlight where we need to target our interventions on a go forward basis. With respect to natural heritage protections, we really do think that there needs to be a continued focus on the preservation of those natural features, and that approach, our planning approaches there, should be integrated with natural hazard management and continue to be delivered on that watershed basis, because there are considerable functional interrelationships between those features that we need to consider when we're implementing change. And we would generally support mechanisms for adequate resourcing of natural heritage review functions to facilitate that appropriately protective approach, but without undue delay to the development process. And I would suggest to you that I don't think that those things are mutually exclusive. I think that if we properly resource and coordinate our processes, we can have both. Okay. In terms of Grey County, certainly agriculture is a really important element of what we do. And so we would like to see the policy document maintain a systems approach for agriculture and really lean into and emphasize that supportive role of rural lands, not only prime agricultural lands, in agri-food production. I know one of the elements of the proposal by the province is to look at introducing additional residential uses into rural areas. And so I think there's a place for that, certainly, but we do want to ensure that that is carefully considered so that we're not undermining the other roles of those areas in terms of aggregates and habitat and forestry and all of the good things that we need those lands to do. And then I think the other thing when we're thinking about the potential introduction of additional residential uses is we need to think forward into the future. So what we're hearing in terms of forecasts around climate change is that we will see changes to our weather patterns, and that could impact on groundwater recharge and water resource availability. And so we want to be cognizant as we move forward that we are protective so that we have water for irrigation, livestock, as well as private residential servicing into the future. We just need to be conscious of those things as we move forward, and we hope for a policy framework that will continue to support that. And then a final slide. Just wanted to highlight again that firm urban boundaries are an additional concept that we'd like to maintain. We do think that it's very important to focus in on that intensification before boundary expansion. And generally, we would support kind of a comprehensive approach to those boundary expansions rather than an ad hoc approach. I think also we'd like to see a hierarchy of settlement areas maintained, and that we would continue to want to drive the majority of development to our serviced primary settlement areas. And then finally, in terms of infrastructure and facility planning, we feel that it's quite important that municipalities continue to be empowered to strategically identify and reserve lands for anticipated growth and future needs. And that should be done strategically alongside our other public agencies and local stakeholders in service delivery, so that we can bring those services and facilities online concurrent with the growth that they're designed to service. So that summarizes, I think, the concepts we'd like to see maintained, as well as the key comments that we'd like to share with the province. We certainly do hope that we will have another opportunity to review and comment on a draft policy document should they decide to proceed with this review process. And we will monitor and report back to you as it is deemed appropriate, kind of depending on how the province decides to proceed. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Liz. Good report. Questions, Councillor Gregg.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warden. Thank you very much, Mr. Warden. I do have just a couple questions, and I'm not going to open up something that's already put to bed here, but one of the questions relates to agricultural systems and firm urban boundaries. But also before that, inclusionary zoning. So everyone's a proponent of it. I've never heard anyone speak ill to it, but who pays for such a thing? So in a subdivision, you decide that 15% is going to be inclusionary zoning. Who's paying for that? Because we had an appendix provided in one of the reports, and it was a HART report from a few years ago, or a HART study. 17,000 and change households in Grey County are above about 120% over median income in the households in Grey County, but everyone else does not meet that. So it can't, if you look at numbers like that, it can't be the taxpayer that's going to pay for inclusionary zoning. It has to be everyone else in a subdivision. Would that be correct? So I guess that's the point. First point of clarity is recognizing it can't be the taxpayer. Those numbers just say they can't afford that inclusionary zoning. And then B, is there opportunity to, if builders want to build a 10,000 square foot home, that there's some sort of a surcharge that can fund such opportunities for inclusionary zoning. But my other question too then is agricultural systems and firm urban boundaries. When I was reading this, I do not know the ins and outs of the recent decision, I think it was in October, about the Hanover West Grey OPA amendment. But there is an appellant in one of the OLT tribunals who dates back to 1990, I think. And she wants to maintain agriculture. This seems to advocate for that. And it advocates for firm urban boundaries, yet a decision a month ago kind of went beyond that. So I'm just wondering how that decision a month ago aligns with these two items in 4 and 5.
Thank you through the warden to Councillor Gregg. So firstly, I would say I wouldn't comment on anything that is pending currently. So I'd like to speak to your questions in terms of broad principles, if that's okay with you. And if I don't get it the first time, happy to take another kick at it. So I guess what I would say generally is that there are certainly going to be situations where boundary expansion is warranted and appropriate. And sometimes that will be at odds with other elements of our policy framework. And so that's when I talk about a robust provincial policy statement, it really does try to kind of get in to help us prioritize in certain situations what comes first. Is it the boundary expansion? Is it the agriculture? But it really is a balancing act. And so I think in talking about firm urban boundaries, really my point there is to speak to the idea that we need to have a process associated with those expansions, that we want to be doing that intensification. We want to be doing good growth forecasting for our settlement areas so that we understand what growth is coming and what we need to prepare for. And if that warrants an expansion, that may well be the case, then we will pursue those. I think what we would want to avoid is the perspective that every request for an expansion will be supported and that there is not a process associated with that. So we want to make sure that we're being considerate, I guess, of those balancing of factors when we're looking at a boundary expansion. So I think probably best to leave it at that point with respect to that. You're correct, it was the $90,000 a year was the threshold from that HART model, and you're right, 40% of our population has a household income above that. There are some categories below in terms of income categories or household income categories. And I think you're right. I think those households are challenged right now to afford housing, to afford groceries and gas, right? We've got interest rates rose again yesterday. Hopefully they're staying. But there's all of these factors that are pressing upon our households and their ability to pay for housing. It all has to be factored in. A general tax approach perhaps is not the way to go, because we're then burdening those households again with an increased tax burden. So my thought is, there has been a general principle in Ontario for a long time that growth pays for growth. In this case, I guess I would identify that we are making quite a bit of an investment when we are approving new growth, not just into the pipes in the ground and everything that we're looking to rebate through development charges, but generally in terms of all of the services that municipalities provide to accommodate that growth. I think along those lines, we want to make sure that we're accommodating the ability for everyone to live in our communities. And so I think going along that same principle of growth pays for growth, there would be a component of, I guess that would be part of the cost of development. I think one of the challenges that we've seen thus far is that inclusionary zoning is only used in specific areas, which can incentivize or disincentivize certain areas in terms of the costs of doing business. My thinking is if there was a more general approach, that was a built-in cost of development, that it would level the playing field for our developers. And so we would be funding that inclusionary zoning. It would come through the development process, part of that growth paying for growth. But if it was applied on a common basis or a broad basis, it wouldn't lead to issues with competition and prioritizing the cost of development on one property versus over the other. So I'll leave it there. I don't know if there's specific questions that we can get into further. Happy to follow up kind of on the principles of inclusionary zoning afterwards, but I would generally agree that we have to be careful in terms of putting those costs back onto the general tax levy because of all of those affordability factors our households are facing.
I appreciate that response very much. It's planning language can be challenging to walk through. So I'm certainly appreciative of that those discussions there. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So our next report is the committees and task forces appointments. Our clerk, Tara Warder, is going to lead us through that, but I need a motion. Mover and seconder, Councillor Keaveney, Councillor Eccles, to put the motion or get the discussion on the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. County Council. The report before you today is our annual committees and task forces appointment report. It comes forward every December and appoints members to various committees, both external and internal, throughout Grey County. Later in November, council was asked to indicate your interest for the committees that you wish to be considered for. And those are all listed and included in the report before you. As it stands right now, appointments to the Agricultural Advisory Committee, the Long-Term Care Redevelopment Task Force, the Board of Health, and the CAO Performance Objectives and Evaluation Committee do require elections. And the motion will note that any elections be done by a show of hands. The Accessibility Advisory Committee and an alternate to the Federation of Agriculture, each still require a candidate to fill those positions. However, I understand that some of you may be interested in some of those two positions. I would also note that the motion includes an appointment for Board of Health members for a 2-year term, as was requested by the Board of Health earlier this year. The Niagara Escarpment Commission has also asked for Grey County to note at least 3 people to be considered for an NEC appointment, and those individuals can be elected officials or staff. Councillors were also asked to indicate whether they were interested in sitting on any of the proposed new committees, which include Community Services, the new Urban Roads and Road Exchange Task Force, and a new Economic and Planning Advisory Committee. And though we're not doing appointments for those committees today, the interest that we've gathered from you over the course of the past couple of weeks will be considered when we bring that report forward to establish those terms of reference. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and then after that, we can work through the committees where elections are required and gauge everyone's interest in continuing to stand, or if they wish to step back, that is an option as well.
Any questions? Everybody understands where we're going? Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Warden Milne. Just one question comes to mind. I see there's a couple committees here that have a little overage on the council members that are interested in participating. So I know there's a couple that are, like the health board in particular, that those numbers are etched in stone. I understand that. But some of the committees I know in the last term, we had just, instead of, hypothetically it was 4, we increased it to 5. Are we considering that now, or are we just going to go through the election or talk each one as we come up? Thank you.
The option is there to certainly change the terms of reference and make the number different. I might suggest that if that were council's wish, that we would maybe do that as a separate motion and direct staff to bring forward an amended terms of reference, and we could bring forward the actual document that would lay out the proposed membership for consideration and appointment at that time.
Tara, if I may, one of the committees, the CAO committee, is one where certainly I would have no objection and would appreciate the participation and the feedback of anybody who cared to provide it. So in that particular case, where we've got an extra person or two, I certainly would be very supportive, since I think in the last term, there was an occasion or two where we struggled with quorum. People are busy. So that in that particular case, if we want to do something, I'd be happy to have that happen.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you. I'll ask one question just on when the Accessibility Advisory Committee may generally meet. If you have an approximate day, I'm not going to hold you to that. Also, though, in increasing the membership in the committees, that means the per diems are being issued more often, more frequently. If people voted, if I'm nominated for a committee and I lose the vote, I'm not holding it. I'm not holding it personally and holding a grudge against anyone. It's just the decision that we're asked to make, and we can't just grow the committees year after year because, or term after term if there's more membership. I mean, nobody should be offended to have an election, and if you're not selected, there's next year. Just my thoughts.
With regard to the question on the Accessibility Advisory Committee, that committee is one where we don't necessarily have a consistent schedule because it does involve a lot of public membership, and we very much try to work with them and their schedules for work and other things like that. So it is, I think generally we have had that one in the afternoon, so in the 1 o'clock, 1:30 range, but not a specific day of the week.
You were going to volunteer for that, Mr. Counselor Gray?
I could make myself available, I think, probably to that timeline.
Excellent. There you go. First one done. Well, unless somebody else wants, Counselor Matrosov.
Thank you. I would also be able to offer to put my name forward for that one. So.
Anyone else have any comments, questions? Counselor Jabrine.
I did actually send Tara an email with regard to that, but since we have two already, I will I'll decline and I'll put my name forward for something else.
Thank you, Councillor Dobreen, and I do have that written down too, that you are interested. So that committee, the Accessibility Committee, does only require one council member. So if we do two, that is fine and we can hold an election. But I just want to make you aware that there is only the one council member required for that committee.
I'll step back, and if Councillor Matrosov is willing to, I serve on Owen Sound Head for several years, and I'm happy allowing Andrea the opportunity.
Oh.
Go ahead, Mr. or Councillor Bourdignon. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. In relation to the committees, I was, listening to what Councillor Greg said, but I was just looking at the ones that require election, long-term care, CAO evaluation, and agriculture. The CAO one, as you put your name down, Mr. Warden, you'd be by default de facto on the committee anyways. So it would only be really one other person for 3 committees, and sometimes we did struggle with quorum. I know in that one, I'm not sure how the rest want to deal with agriculture and long-term care. But seeing for the minimal per diem and the amount of times they meet per year, I think it may be advantageous to increase that just by, it's only one counselor, and I understand the growing of them every year, but with the interest in year 1, I think it'd be advantageous to just allow that one extra counselor on those 3 committees, especially with you moving to the warden seat. Just my opinion, Mr. Warden.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Bourdignon, sorry. Councillor Dobreen.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Tara, through you to Tara. Tara, do we reappoint them annually, or is this for the term?
Most of these are annual appointments, with the exception of the redevelopment planning task force is for the term. And I think offhand, that's the only one, but I'd have to do a quick glance. The ones that haven't been established yet, that's to be determined. Agricultural advisories every year. And Board of Health, if this motion is passed, would also be a 2-year appointment. And Niagara Escarpment Commission is, I believe, 3 years.
Okay. So we're good with Councillor Matrosov on the Accessibility Committee. Sorry, Councillor Carleton.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Just a comment on adding to those committees. If you, with the warden and 6 counselors, that gives 7 on the redevelopment committee. If you add another one, you have a chance for a tied vote at times. So I'm wondering at the advisability of taking it to an even number on a committee. Just a thought.
Certainly a consideration to make. We have had committees in the past that do have an even number. It's not insurmountable because a tie would be a lost vote. But yes, it's not something that we'd necessarily recommend against. If that wish of council was to add members, we could accommodate that. And just if I could backtrack a little bit, if council wishes, specifically with the CAO Advisory Committee, if you would like to amend the terms of reference, I could suggest we could amend the motion to increase the membership to 5 plus the warden, if that was the wish of council.
Thoughts? Councillor Greg.
Thought I was only speaking at the start of the meeting today, but if you have quorum of 5 members right now, you need 3 of 5. If you add 1 member and you go to 6, you're going to need 4 of 6 now. I'm not sure if that factors in, but you're not needing the same 3. You're still 4 of 6, not 3 of 6. So.
Well, I wonder if I could suggest that we go through them one committee at a time. Sorry, yes, one at a time. And I think what we're going to propose here, if changes are done or needed, we'll have one motion to amend them at the end, or amend the motion at the end to include all of the changes that we made to the various committees. So let's start at the top with the, well, we've already got Councillor Matrosovs on the Accessibility Committee. And if everybody's agreeable with that, let's move on to the Long-Term Care Committee of Management. So is that okay, Tara? Okay, I'll let you carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. So absent any proposed movement on the Committee of Management, that committee proposes the warden and 6 council members, and that is, we've received that interest from the members, Hutchison, Nielsen, Carlton, Mackey, Patterson, and Keaveney. So if everyone's happy with that, we can have that committee set. The next one was the Long-Term Care Redevelopment Planning Task Force. An election was required on this one, absent any movement off that list. So we have Councillor McKay, Hutchinson, Gregg, Eccles, McQueen, Mackey, and Matrosovs, which is the warden and 7 members.
So what's the feeling of the group? You want to continue with 6, or do you want to, Kevin or Councillor Eccles?
So there is, I would suggest that we stay with the way it is. And I would respectfully decline on sitting on that. Councillor Hutchison is there, certainly representing West Grey. I don't think we need 2 members on that. It's going to be a very exciting project to work the way through, but I don't think we just need 2 members from West Grey being there. 1 member may operate from the West Grey side of it in that action. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Eccles, any other thoughts on that particular? Is everybody satisfied with that one? At least for now. Okay, good.
And the next one was the CA Performance Evaluation Committee. So we do have an extra member on that. But if council wishes to add a member, we could, Sarah will propose an amendment to the motion, and we could add that onto the amendment if council wishes to do that. Right now running is Councillors Hutchinson, Eccles, Bourdignon, Body, Councillor Keaveney, and then the warden as the 5th member.
Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. In light of CO Wingrove's comments, I would move that we increase the number to the evaluation committee to 5 plus the warden.
Okay, that'll be noted in the overall amendment when we come to that, unless anybody wants to object. For now, at least. Okay, carry on, Tara.
Great. The Agricultural Advisory Committee is the warden and 4 council members. So we do have 5 interested members. So they are Councillor Hutchinson, Dobreen, Councillors McQueen, Mackey, and Keaveney. So absent any movement on that list, that is one where we would require an election.
Councillor DeBreen.
Through you, Warden Milne, I would decline on that committee pending the terms of reference and membership required in the others that I have indicated an interest for.
Thank you for that. Anything else? Anybody else wants on that one? Sorry, Councillor DeBreen.
And I would volunteer to be the alternate for the Grey County Federation.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, that one's good. Carry on, Tara.
And so in terms of stewardship, Grey Bruce, Councillor Matrosov's expressed interest in sitting on that body. The Grey County Federation of Agriculture, Councillor McQueen as the appointed member and Councillor Dobreen as the alternate. The Community Drug and Alcohol Strategy, we had requests from Councillor McKay and Councillor Hutchinson. And that requires 2 members. The Board of Health is the warden and 3 council members. We've received interest from Councillor Eccles, Councillor Carlton, Councillor Body, and Councillor Patterson. So that is another one that would require an election.
Anybody, any thoughts on that one? Everybody wants to let their name stand, so I think Tara will proceed with an election unless somebody, well, I guess it's not our call to increase that one, is it? No, no, there's no option on that one. Sorry, Dr. Air would be, well, anyway. Tara.
So we can hold an election at the end. We just have the Niagara Escarpment Commission to note. So there has been a call from the NEC asking for 3 nominees. Councillors Matrosovs and McQueen have expressed interest, and the positions can be, the nominations can be either by elected officials or staff. So CAO Kim Wingrove has volunteered, I believe, if there are no other members that wish to have their name stand.
And one note is that you must have Niagara Escarpment in your municipality to be eligible for a nomination. Okay, so just the Board of Health we need to sort.
Excuse me, with regard to the NEC, and a staff position, we were evaluating this and finalizing the report in kind of quick order. If council's satisfied to let the name stand, I would suggest though that Randy Schertzer would be a stronger NEC representative than I would. And so I would just ask that we substitute his name for mine. I was just putting something there. So we had 3 names, but I do think Randy would be a better candidate if you're all right with that. Thanks.
Well, I didn't know we were nominating other people, but that's good, Randy. Thanks. Any other staff want to jump in? No, that's good. All right. So back to the clerk's department here, I guess.
So the only election we need to have is for the Board of Health, and the proposal is that that's for a 2-year term. Members are able to vote for up to 3 members. So I will start with all those in favor of Councillor Eccles being on the Board of Health. Sorry.
Oh. Go ahead, Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Previously, we got to hear from the individual members as to why they wanted to participate in different committees. So it would be helpful prior to casting a vote to know why our members wish to be on the board. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Mackey. That is entirely appropriate, and the clerk apologized. She missed that. Well, she told me she did, so I didn't just assume that. Again, back to the clerk.
Councillor Eccles, do you wish to make a
30-second
up to 2-minute presentation to County Council?
Well, thank you very much, but Mr. Mackey for putting me on the spot here to make a nomination speech. But I thought we were going to really do it in reverse order, so I'll defer to Mr. Patterson. No, I have been on the Board of Health in previous terms. I'm very interested in it. And from a personal perspective, certainly, doing the work there and following it up. It is, as I said, a personal interest and something that I enjoy very much and did enjoy very much is my time there. And also being part of having some skill sets when it gets into negotiations through that with the number of unions that they have and working through that. And I was pleased to be chair of the health unit for a term as well too. So bringing those skills and experience back again to continue the good work that the health unit does for our community is the reason that I'm putting my name forward today. Thank you.
Councillor Carlton. I presume we're going in the order that we have there. Yep, Councillor Carlton, please.
Thank you. This really just is a personal interest for me, and I think it would expand my knowledge in this area. And that's basically it. It's just something I would like to get more involved in with the community. I have a daughter in healthcare and my parents are in long-term care. It just seems to be something that's coming forward in front of me all the time. So I guess I'm just looking for more experience.
Thank you. Councillor Body.
Thank you, Warden. This interests me, big part over the years. We've always had a member from Owen Sound, from going back to Arlene to Brian in between. So many of the issues that they're dealing with at the health unit, from homelessness and addictions and various issues that they will be dealing with, happen more in Owen Sound than just about anywhere, just because we have the services and the health services, et cetera, social services through this building in Owen Sound that brings people to town that stay, that the health unit has got a big corner of. And that's my interest in it, is to be able to bring the local understanding from the city of Owen Sound and the things that we hear through City Hall that they think we're should be dealing with, when it is at times the county or the health unit's responsibility. So that's my interest, is to be able to have that flow of information from downtown to the health board. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Warden Millen, County Council. I have a keen interest in public health and specifically the overall health of Grey and Bruce residents. I believe it is important for new people to join the board, but it is equally important for experienced members to continue on the board. I have held the position of vice chair. I am currently the chair and would appreciate your support to be a member of the Board of Health to provide continuity and stability. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're on to the election. Madam Clerk. Counselor McQueen.
I'd like to propose a motion that this vote is secret ballot. The only reason I say that, because we're all individuals and have personalities around here, and it really puts us in a spot because there's going to be one person that can't make it. And it's no fault of anybody. But we just did this through our committees last night, and we did it through committees of the public and also others. We did it through secret ballot. There's no hard feelings. It just is the process, because I find it really puts us in a spot because we can't vote for all four. So I would like to move a motion that it is a secret ballot.
I can appreciate your concerns, Counselor McQueen, entirely, but I'm not sure the procedural bylaw allows us to do that. I'll defer to the clerk, although she's saying no. So I'm going to call your motion out of order because we simply can't do that. Our procedural bylaw does not allow that. Please.
I'd like to move a motion that we override our procedural bylaw to allow a secret ballot for this vote.
Is there a second? Seconded by Counselor McKay. Madam Clerk wishes to address. Counselor Carlton.
In thinking about it and the other three who have put their names forward, I would withdraw mine because I think they will represent us very well there. And then we don't have to go to any kind of ballot.
Well, then. I know who's buying drinks for Counselor Carlton when we're done.
Sorry, County Council, thank you. I would just like to close the loop on that the municipal act it provides that the only vote a council can do it by secret ballot is for the warden. So Warden Milne is correct that we wouldn't be able to select our committees by a secret ballot.
So Counselor Carlton saved us a lot of hurt on that one. Thank you.
Will be very well represented.
Indeed, we will. Indeed, we will. Okay, then. So, Madam Clerk, I'll let you finish off whatever procedurally we need to do to finish that off.
Thank you. So in effect, we would, based on our discussions here, the wording of an amendment motion would be that the terms of reference for, I just apologize, go back to my notes here. All the members of each committees, as outlined in the staff report, are endorsed. The warden's appointment to the various bodies is also endorsed. That the CAO Performance Evaluation Committee terms of reference be changed to increase membership to 5 members plus the warden. And that Councillor Dobreen be appointed as the Grey County Federation of Agriculture alternate. And that no further elections are required.
Please hold. Okay, back to order. Go ahead.
Thank you for your indulgence there. With the Economic and Planning Advisory Committee that we will be bringing terms of reference forward for in January, there are 9 counselors that have expressed interest to sit on that committee. And typically the warden has also been on that committee as well. So we will run into having a quorum of council if there is a desire for all of those members to stand. So if there, having said that, if there are any members that are unsure or perhaps don't want to sit on that committee based on their other appointments today, then please let us know and we can take that into consideration when we develop those terms of reference. I believe historically we've had 6 or 7 members on the Economic Development and Planning Advisory Committee, but I can't remember offhand.
So we don't need that decision today, but just keep that in mind. So if you think maybe you want to step back from economic development, please let Tara know so that they can avoid that quorum of council issue. Councillor DeBreen.
Through you to Tara, the summary that you provided for the changes to the resolution, I did not hear whether you included the Grey County Joint Advisory Committee and the appointment of Councillor Matrasoff.
My apologies. That is that her appointment was intended to be in that amendment as well.
Okay. Oop.
Sorry.
All right. So a little bit convoluted there, but we've got our where we're at. Councillor Mackey, you have something?
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Just a question in regards to the 2 proposed new committees that we're going to be creating and the total number of councillors allowed on. 8 years ago, we had the 4 standing committees and we had nine members of council sit on each committee. So why could we not have 9 members on these 2, break things up so that every member sits on one or the other committees?
Good question. I don't know.
Once we have a quorum of council, so 50% plus 1, which would be our 10 on this council, we are essentially holding a council meeting if there are 10 members present. So even if it is a committee, there is a quorum of council and we would be essentially having a council meeting.
So thanks, Tara. That being said, if we had 9 members on each committee and the warden didn't sit on both, the warden sat on one or the other, each municipality essentially would assign, 1 member to each committee, similar to what we did 8 years ago when we had, the 4 standing committees. We had representation from each lower tier municipality on 2 committees back then. I'm just wondering why we couldn't round this one off and have 9 members on, the economic development and 9 members on the social services committee, just to give everyone a good taste of what's going on. That was one of the advantages to the previous, committee structure, was everyone got to dig deep down into what was going on in the county and we often moved around. So you got that wide breadth of what was going on. So just my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Mackey. And I think there's a lot of merit in what you're suggesting. Perhaps it's a bit difficult, especially for our new councillors. You weren't here when we talked about the Mental Health and Addictions Task Force that really was providing the foundation for the creation of the Community Services Committee. As staff, we see the Community Services Committee as a place where a number of those issues and initiatives that the county is deeply involved in to do with social services, social housing, childcare, affordable housing, and the community safety and well-being. Like there's an awful lot that can be covered there. It's my hope that going forward, anytime we're appointing someone to an external committee or body, that there's a clear path for that person to provide information back to this table. You know, similar to what happens with the health unit comes and speaks, talks to their minutes. If you're on an outside part of an outside organization, whether that's the Federation of Agriculture or Alice or whatever, is there a table for you to come back to and provide comments and remarks so that all of council's kind of aware and staying in sync with what that group is concerned with or moving forward with? So I'm thinking right now it's probably hard for you to choose that committee because you don't know anything about it and you weren't here. Maybe with a little bit more background, and when we come to look at the terms of reference for it in January, someone else might feel comfortable in shifting over from ECDEV to community services, and that would give, I think, what you're suggesting, Councillor Mackey, that even number on each one. Okay, but we can evolve, and next year we'll have this conversation again. Thank you.
Councillor Eccles.
Did I miss something, or is the rural road exchange? That's coming forward as well too. We just seem to be talking about these two. I know that road thing, Mr. Hoy's really keen to get at it, 7 years later, but something he's just bouncing at, and I'd hate to leave him stranded on the side of the road.
Yeah, I'm pretty near sure he's ready to go with that one, but yes, that will be one of the three that will come back with a mandate. Yes, absolutely. Okay, we have an amendment to the motion to consider all the changes we made. Unless there's any further discussion, I'll call the question. All those. Do we have a mover? I thought we had.
Councillor Mackey, increasing the scale evaluation, and then I built the rest of it around his. So I don't know. Yes, this one.
So we need a seconder. I'm Councillor Gregg. Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Gregg.
Well, if this is the time, and just listening to Councillor Mackey's comments about representation somewhat being equitable in the past throughout committees, I was interested in moving a motion that, looking at the roster of good candidates for the Economic and Planning Advisory Committee, that each municipality be represented to a maximum of 1 member per municipality. And that would give staff clear direction in terms of constructing the terms of reference and the numbers.
I'm not going to disagree with you, other than we already have a motion on the floor. So of course I can't accept your motion right now. But I think the point is taken. When they bring the mandate back, perhaps that's something that could be considered for when that comes back. Is that agreeable, Councillor Gregg? Yeah, okay. So now we're on again, back to the amendment to the original motion to include all the changes and so on we made. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Now we're back to the amended motion. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Carleton, Councillor McQueen. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Excellent. Thank you very much. The Clerk's Department thanks you. We have no closed meeting matters. Other business. Verbal update on the passing of Bill 23. Mr. Taylor, welcome back to the podium.
I'll just point out for council's benefits, nowhere near dinner, so I'm still okay. But I will try to keep this brief because it has been a long meeting. Just for council's awareness, Bill 23 was passed on November 28th, 2022. Royal assent was received. For those that may be unfamiliar, Bill 23 amends a number of acts, including the Planning Act, the Conservation Authorities Act, the Development Charges Act, the Ontario Land Tribunal Act, and others. As I noted earlier today, the county had submitted comments, as had a number of our member municipalities, to the province on this. There were some changes between when the county made our original report and what was ultimately passed. Some of those changes related back to the appeals on planning applications, as well as maintaining the ability for green development standards. There were some other matters that the county had raised questions and concerns over that haven't been changed. In saying that, you know, our intent as staff is certainly not to sling mud at anyone. The province is doing the best they can to try to look at more housing quicker, and we certainly want to be there with the province and with our member municipalities as partners in seeking solutions to this. At this stage, it's still fairly early on. We're still trying to wade through what the legislative changes mean to us, as per Councillor McQueen's question earlier on development charges. There's stuff that we think we know, and there's other stuff that we're still waiting on some regulations on. And even in the break at lunch here, I was corrected that some of those agreements that we spoke to on the development charges piece actually wouldn't be the county entering into the agreements. It would need to be our member municipalities. So long story short, we're monitoring what's been passed so far, and we're also monitoring the future regulations that are going to be released. We will continue to update council, and there will be some discussions coming forward at a later date through future staff reports with respect to what those impacts might be and what we might need to be considering at either the county council table or your member municipal tables to work through some of these changes to make sure that we're achieving the province's desired goal of trying to get more housing built in an efficient fashion. Certainly, we would say that the development charges and some of the changes to maybe the Conservation Authorities Act are some of the ones that we might have to deal with first and foremost, and have some of those discussions likely in the new year as to what those mean. And certainly, as we get those further details, we will share them with council. So happy to answer any questions if I can, but stay tuned, I guess.
Thank you, Scott. Any questions? Councillor Mackey?
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Scott, because there's so much going on with Bill 23, there's the planning departments or the planners that each municipality has along with the Grey County planners, are they planning on a training session for the elected officials anytime when they've got a true picture of what's going on?
Through you, Mr. Warden. Thank you for your question, Councillor Mackey. It's not something we had planned today. We're still discussing between the county planners, the municipal planners, people like the conservation authorities. It's certainly something we could contemplate in terms of putting together some background. Maybe that happens through a session, or maybe it happens through a report where obviously councillors are invited to ask questions, but we're willing to take any direction from council in that regard. Sometimes we see out of these legislative changes, different provincial ministries will hold training sessions. So in the past, we have seen training sessions from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs on some of the matters related to their mandate. So we can keep our ears to the ground on that as well. And if there's any that are appropriate to share with county or municipal councils, we can do so. And as I said, we'll certainly try to provide as much information as we can in whatever format council desires, whether that's a staff report or whether that's some sort of seminar or training session. We're open to suggestions.
Very good. Any further questions for Scott? Good. Thank you very much, Scott. The next one is the Roma Board of Directors call for nominations, and this will be spoke to by Tara Warder. I have. Do you want a motion? But we really no. Okay.
So we have received a call for nominations from Roma for any members that wish to be considered for the Rural Ontario Municipal Association Board of Directors. This is open for any motions if you wish to nominate anybody.
Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you very much, Warden Milne. Just for reference to my fellow councillors here at the Grey County table, yesterday at the Grey Highlands Council meeting, Grey Highlands did nominate me for a Zone 2 representative for Roma. So I will be at part of the election process in January at the Roma conference, just for information for my fellow councillors here.
Thank you, sir. So is anyone, Councillor DeBreen?
Through you, Warden Milne, what is the frequency of meetings? Are they held virtually? If we could get a little bit more information. I'm sure it was probably shared with us, and
Sure.
Through you, Mr. Warden, Roma board meetings are held 8 times per year, typically on the second Thursday of the month in January, March, April, June, October, November, and December in Toronto. The August meeting is held at the AMO conference. This year that will be in London. A midterm meeting is held every 2 years in May or June. In addition, board members may serve on subcommittees from time to time or ask to be a Roma rep on others committees. Time for this will vary with the activity. The term of the Roma board is 4 years. It does appear, to your point, that just based on how they're describing expense reimbursement, that these are in-person meetings. Thank you.
Anybody else have any thoughts on maybe putting their name forward? I don't know is there a deadline for this, Tara? End of December, likely. Okay, not seeing anyone, but if one, okay, Councillor DeBreen.
Just for further clarity, county council meets the second Thursday and the fourth Thursday of the month, correct?
Nothing's ever easy. Well, we'll leave it for now. If the deadline, if the spirit moves you and you want to put your name forward, by all means, the clerk would be happy to hear from you. I don't think we have to have somebody. No,
we don't.
exactly. All right, moving on to, Tara, you have another one there, emergency management.
You won't hear from me for a while to this one. This is another appointment that we do at the beginning of each term, and it's for the purposes of emergency management and appointing alternate wardens when the warden cannot act during an emergency. So a bylaw was passed in 2019 that outlines the process for selecting the alternate wardens. By virtue of the process and the positions of deputy warden and past warden, our first alternate would be deputy warden Councillor McQueen and past warden Councillor Eccles. And essentially, I would just ask for any volunteers that would like to be considered for third and fourth alternate, and we will put your name into the ballot box and draw names out in order to establish that priority ranking.
Okay, so we need a volunteer, 2 volunteers. Councillor Mackey. Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Craig? Anyone else? Okay, we got our 2. The clerk will now pick out who the third alternate will be. Councillor Mackey. And Councillor Gregg will be the 4th. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That certainly helps. Yes, we need a motion to endorse those. Councillor McKay and Councillor Nielsen. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Any notices of motion? Not seeing any. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Mather. Oh, hold on. Councillor McQueen.
I better start all over again. Sorry, Mr. Warden, I missed some good news and celebration at the first part of our other meeting, and it was brought to my attention. It's worth mentioning that Ray Robertson was the winner of the Ontario Forage Leader Leadership at the annual awards conference, and Ray has been very involved with the Ontario Forage Council since year 2000. And those that don't know Ray Robertson, he works at the Grey Ag Services there in Markdale for a long time. I think he's like the AgCon. And anyway, I just think that it's we should give him a round of applause for him being the recipient and the winner of that award.
Thank you for that, Councillor McQueen. Just one motion left, and Councillor Bordigno has been very studious to follow along here today. So I'm going to ask you if you'd like to move to adjourn. Thank you, sir. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Pringle. All those in favor? We now stand adjourned. Thank you very much for your indulgence.